The aroma of freshly brewed coffee permeated the kitchen as Elena Morales mechanically reviewed the monthly account statements. At 42, she had turned this routine into a ritual. Every first Sunday of the month, at 7 in the morning, before the rest of the house awoke. It was her moment of tranquility to keep the family finances in order, a task that, as the principal accountant at Gonzalez and Amp. Associates, she performed with surgical precision. 15 years of marriage to Martin Acosta had built a life many would envy. A 3-story residence in La Condesa, 2 luxury cars in the garage, annual vacations to exclusive destinations, and a solid college fund for Sophia, their 14-year-old daughter. From the outside, they were the perfect definition of success. She, a respected forensic accountant specializing in detecting financial fraud. He, a charismatic real estate investor whose name frequently appeared in local business magazines. Elena slid her finger across her tablet screen, meticulously reviewing each bank transaction. Her eyes, deep brown and framed by the first lines of expression, stopped at an unusual transaction, a transfer of $12,000 to an unknown account, made 3 days ago. She frowned as she verified the digital signature. Martin had authorized it remotely from his banking app. Could he have bought something for our anniversary? She murmured to herself, trying to quiet the slight discomfort beginning to form in her stomach. She continued reviewing the accounts, but the uneasiness persisted. Over the past 6 months, she had noticed a pattern of small changes in her marriage. Nothing dramatic, nothing she could point to with certainty, just subtle variations in Martin's routine. Work meetings that extended until midnight. Increased frequency of business trips. A new obsession with his physical appearance that included designer clothes he previously considered unnecessary and daily gym sessions. Elena shook her head, trying to dispel unwanted thoughts. She had always been too analytical, looking for patterns where perhaps none existed. Martin worked hard, deserved his small luxuries. And after 15 years, it was natural that they both needed space and autonomy. The sound of heavy footsteps on the stairs interrupted her reflections. Martin appeared in the kitchen doorway, his hair damp from the shower and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Good morning, honey," he greeted, heading straight for the coffee machine. "Checking accounts again? You should rest at least on Sundays." Elena observed her husband as he poured coffee into his personalized mug, the one Sophia had given him on his birthday with the inscription "Best Dad in the Universe." At 45, Martin retained the magnetic attractiveness that had captivated her at that corporate party where they met. Perhaps he had a few more gray hairs at his temples, but the years had only refined his features, giving him that distinguished look that seemed to open doors in the competitive real estate world. "Just making sure everything's in order," she responded naturally, locking her tablet screen. "By the way, I saw a $12,000 transfer to an account I don't recognize." Martin took a sip of coffee before answering, his gaze fixed on the garden visible through the kitchen window. "Oh, that. It's a deposit to secure a property in Polanco. It came up unexpectedly and I had to act quickly." "I was going to tell you about it today," he explained, with that carefree tone he used for his business dealings. "If all goes well, we'll double the investment in less than 6 months." Elena nodded, mentally recording the details. 15 years married to an investor had taught her to recognize legitimate business opportunities, but also to detect hastily fabricated explanations. Martin's response sounded plausible, perfectly aligned with his usual operations, but something in his body language triggered the same alarms that Elena used when auditing companies suspected of fraud. "You look tired," she commented, deliberately changing the subject. "What time did you get in last night?" "Around 1, Martin replied while distractedly checking his phone. Dinner with the Japanese investors ran longer than expected. You know how these meetings are, first business, then socializing for hours to establish trust. Japanese culture. Of course, Elena responded automatically. A fleeting memory crossed her mind. 3 years ago, she had attended negotiations with Japanese businessmen as a translator. The meeting had concluded promptly at 9 o'clock, with the visitors apologizing for leaving early by Western standards, explaining that in Japanese business culture, Punctuality and adequate rest were valued. Alana maintained her neutral expression as Martin announced he would be going out to play golf with some clients. She watched him busily prepare, carefully selecting his branded sportswear and spraying himself with that new cologne he had recently started using. A more intense, more youthful fragrance than his usual scent of the past 10 years. "I'll be back for dinner," he promised, distractedly kissing her on the forehead before leaving. When she heard the Audi's engine fading away, Elena remained motionless in the kitchen, with a strange feeling of emptiness expanding in her chest. Perhaps she was overreacting. Perhaps years of investigating financial fraud had made her unnecessarily suspicious. But if her profession had taught her anything, it was that inconsistent patterns were rarely coincidences. Decisively, she unlocked her tablet again and began a deeper review of the financial movements of the past 6 months. As a joint holder of all accounts, she had complete access to the transaction history. What she found caused an uncomfortable tightness in her chest: small but constant cash withdrawals, charges at exclusive restaurants on nights when Martin was supposedly working late, purchases at women's clothing boutiques in sizes that definitely didn't correspond to either her or Sophia. Elena breathed deeply, trying to control the trembling that was beginning to manifest in her hands. As a professional, she knew she needed more evidence before reaching conclusions. As a wife, she felt a mixture of anger, fear, and that peculiar kind of shame that inexplicably affects those who are betrayed rather than those who betray. Sophia's appearance in the kitchen, with her headphones on and still in her pajamas, forced Elena to compose herself immediately. Her daughter was at that delicate age where she absorbed every detail of her surroundings, especially any sign of tension between her parents. "Morning, Mom," Sophia greeted, heading for the refrigerator. "Is Dad already gone?" "Good morning, sweetheart." "Yes, he went to play golf with some clients," Elena replied, forcing a smile. "What are your plans for today?" While Sophia detailed her schedule, homework, a video call with friends, plans to convince her mother to take her to the mall, Elena's mind was already mapping out her next steps. If there was indeed something to discover, she would approach it with the same methodical precision she applied to her professional investigations. The rest of Sunday passed with artificial normalcy. Elena prepared lunch, helped Sophia with a geometry project, and even managed to laugh genuinely during their evening movie session. But beneath that veneer of routine, her mind was continuously processing, analyzing, planning. When Martin returned, as promised, just in time for dinner, his slight sunburn confirmed that he had indeed spent time outdoors. Golf with clients was a plausible story. What didn't fit was the faint trace of a perfume, not his cologne, but a distinctly feminine scent, that Elena detected when he hugged her. A delicate, floral fragrance that definitely wasn't from the golf course. That night, lying next to a deeply sleeping Martin, Elena made a decision. She would investigate thoroughly, not driven by paranoia or jealousy, but by the same professional instinct that had built her successful career. If her suspicions were unfounded, she would find relief. If they were confirmed, she would be prepared. Monday morning arrived with the usual chaos of a household where both parents worked and a teenager needed to get to school on time. Martin left early for a meeting with potential investors, kissing Elena and Sophia goodbye with his usual charm. Once alone, Elena called her office, explaining that she would work remotely that day due to some personal matters. As soon as Sophia left for school, Elena began her investigation in earnest. First, she compiled a detailed spreadsheet of all financial movements of the last year. The pattern became clearer. 6 months ago, the irregularities began to appear. Small at first, almost imperceptible, but gradually increasing in frequency and amount. Next, she accessed Martin's email account. They had shared passwords early in their marriage, a practice that, while theoretically maintained, had become more of a formality than a reality in recent years. To her surprise, the password still worked, revealing an inbox meticulously organized into folders. Martin had always been fastidious about digital organization. What caught her attention wasn't what she found, but what she didn't find. There were no suspicious emails, no communication that could indicate an affair or secret financial dealings. In fact, his email was so perfectly clean that it raised Elena's suspicions even more. After 15 years in forensic accounting, She knew that immaculate records often hid the most elaborate deceptions. Her instinct led her to check if Martin had other email accounts. Using her specialized knowledge, she explored recovery options for his main email, discovering that indeed, there was an alternate account linked as a recovery option, martina2023@gmail.com. A recent account, judging by the numerical suffix. Getting access to this second account would be more challenging and potentially cross ethical and legal lines. Elena paused, contemplating her next move. She was a professional with a reputation for integrity, but she was also a wife who sensed her family was in danger. After a moment of reflection, she decided to continue her investigation through other means. She turned her attention to Martin's recent credit card statements, which revealed a pattern of expenses at La Cantina, an upscale restaurant downtown. Always on Tuesdays and Thursdays, always between 8 and 10 p.m., always with charges consistent with dinner for two. These were nights when Martin had claimed to be working late at the office. Elena checked her calendar. Today was Tuesday. Martin had already mentioned he would be late tonight, citing a presentation he needed to prepare for tomorrow's client meeting. A lie that now seemed transparent. With determined calmness, Elena made a reservation at La Cantina for 7:30 p.m., requesting a table with a good view of the dining room but somewhat secluded. She then called Lucia, her most trusted colleague and friend since college, briefly explaining the situation. "I need someone else to see whatever happens tonight," Elena concluded. "If I'm wrong, we'll just have enjoyed an excellent dinner. If I'm right, I'll be there," Lucia assured her. "And Elena, no matter what happens, remember who you are. You're the strongest person I know." After ensuring Sophia would stay at a friend's house for a group project, Elena dedicated the rest of the day to preparing herself mentally and emotionally for what the evening might reveal. She selected a black dress she rarely wore, applied makeup that accentuated her features without being obvious, and put on the pearl necklace Martin had given her on their 10th anniversary. At exactly 7:25 p.m., Elena entered La Cantina. The maitre d' led her to the table she had requested, where Lucia was already waiting, elegant in her typical lawyer outfit. "You look formidable," Lucia commented as Elena took her seat. "How are you holding up?" "Like I'm about to audit the most important account of my life," Elena replied with grim humor. "Let's order wine." As they sipped their Cabernet Sauvignon and exchanged superficial conversation, Elena kept discreetly scanning the restaurant entrance. At 8:10 p.m., just as she was beginning to think he might have chosen a different venue tonight, Martin walked in. He wasn't alone. The woman accompanying him was perhaps 30 years old, stunningly beautiful with long auburn hair and a confident elegance. Martin guided her with his hand lightly touching the small of her back, a gesture of intimacy Elena recognized all too well. "That's him," Elena whispered unnecessarily to Lucia, who had already noticed the couple being seated at a corner table. "And that's definitely not a business dinner," Lucia observed as Martin leaned across the table to caress the woman's hand. Elena felt a strange detachment, as if she were observing evidence in a case file rather than witnessing her husband's infidelity. She noted every detail with clinical precision, how Martin ordered for both without consulting the woman, suggesting familiarity with her preferences. How they shared a bottle of Vieux Clicquot, his special occasion champagne. How his eyes never scanned the room, confident in his privacy. "Would you like to confront him now?" Lucia asked, concern evident in her voice. Elena took a slow sip of wine, weighing her options. A public confrontation would provide immediate emotional release but limit her ability to gather more information. And Elena needed more information, not just about the affair, but about what else Martin might be hiding. "No," she finally decided. "This is just confirmation of what I already suspected. But there's more to this story. Remember that large transfer I mentioned? It doesn't fit the pattern of an affair. There's something bigger happening." They finished their meal in strained conversation, deliberately lingering until Martin and his companion had left. Elena noticed that he paid in cash, unusual for him, as he typically preferred to accumulate points on his premium credit card. When Elena returned home, the house was quiet and empty. She used this solitude to continue her investigation, now with renewed purpose. If Martin was hiding an affair, what else might he be concealing? she remembered a detail that had bothered her intermittently over the past few years. In her professional work, Elena routinely encountered clients with offshore accounts and complex financial structures. Some were legitimate tax planning strategies. Others masked more nefarious activities. 3 years ago, while preparing their joint tax return, she had noticed a discrepancy between Martin's reported income and the lifestyle they maintained. At the time, he had explained it as successful, under-the-radar real estate flips that would be reported in aggregate at year-end. The explanation had seemed plausible enough, especially as their tax filings ultimately balanced. But now, with the confirmation of his deception in their personal life, Elena revisited this financial anomaly with fresh skepticism. She booted up her secure work laptop and accessed a specialized database used by financial forensic investigators. It wasn't strictly protocol to use it for personal matters, but Elena rationalized that potential financial fraud transcended the personal. If Martin was involved in illegal financial activities, she had a professional obligation to investigate. Cross-referencing data from various sources, Elena discovered a pattern of shell companies established in the Cayman Islands, all with tenuous connections to Martin's established business entities. The structure was sophisticated, designed to evade casual detection. But Elena wasn't a casual observer. She was a specialist in following complex money trails. By midnight, she had uncovered enough to be certain Martin maintained a secret fortune sheltered from both tax authorities and, more personally wounding, from her. The amounts flowing through these offshore entities dwarfed what she had believed to be their joint wealth. While she had been meticulously managing household finances, carefully investing for Sophia's education, Martin had been building a parallel financial empire. The discovery left Elena breathless. The betrayal was double-edged, emotional infidelity compounded by financial deceit. Everything she had believed about their partnership, the foundation of trust, transparency, shared goals, crumbled under the weight of this revelation. When she heard Martin's key in the lock at nearly 1 a.m., Elena had already composed herself. She was sitting in the dimly lit kitchen, a glass of water untouched before her. "Elena? Why are you still up?" Martin asked, surprise evident in his voice. He smelled faintly of alcohol and that same feminine perfume she had detected earlier. "Couldn't sleep," she replied simply. "How was your presentation preparation?" Martin loosened his tie, creating a performance of exhaustion. "Productive but draining. The Anderson project has more complications than anticipated. I think we'll need to restructure the financing model." Elena nodded, maintaining her neutral expression. Once, she would have offered suggestions, engaged with the details of his work challenges. Now, she simply observed the practiced ease of his lies. "You should get some rest," she suggested, standing up. "Tomorrow will be another long day." As they prepared for bed in their usual routine, Martin showering first, Elena setting the alarm, she maintained her composure through the surreal normality of it all. Lying beside him in the darkness, listening to his breathing gradually deepen into sleep, Elena mapped out her strategy. She wouldn't confront him immediately. Not about the affair, and certainly not about the offshore accounts. Knowledge was power, and premature confrontation would only alert Martin, potentially leading him to move or secure his hidden assets beyond her reach. Instead, she would document everything meticulously, consult discreetly with appropriate professionals, and prepare for the inevitable dissolution of their marriage on terms that protected both her and Sophia. The next morning, Elena awoke before the alarm, a plan crystallizing in her mind. While Martin and Sophia still slept, she made a series of calls from her home office. First to her bank, arranging for the creation of a new individual account separate from any joint holdings with Martin. Next to her financial advisor, scheduling an urgent appointment. Finally, to a divorce attorney recommended by Lucia, not to file immediately, but to understand her options and begin preparations. By the time Martin appeared in the kitchen, impeccably dressed for his important client meeting, Elena had already established the framework for her financial independence. "You're up early," he commented, reaching for his travel mug. "Lot on my mind," she replied truthfully. Martin paused, studying her face with a flicker of concern. "Everything okay?" Elena smiled, a practiced expression that revealed nothing of her inner turmoil. "Just work stress." the Menendez audit is challenging. He seemed relieved by this mundane explanation, quickly reverting to his own concerns. I might be late again tonight. This Anderson deal is becoming all-consuming. I understand completely, Elena assured him, thinking of the beautiful auburn-haired woman at La Cantina. Sophia and I will manage. After Martin left, Elena dropped Sophia at school and headed to her office. Rather than focusing on the Menendez audit as she had claimed, she spent the day consolidating information about Martin's hidden financial activities. Using her professional expertise, she created a comprehensive map of his offshore network, companies, accounts, asset holdings, transfer patterns. What emerged was both impressive and disturbing. Martin had systematically diverted profits from his legitimate real estate ventures into the shadow financial structure for years. The total concealed assets amounted to approximately $4.7 million, a fortune that, as his legal spouse, Elena was technically entitled to share but had been kept deliberately ignorant of. More concerning were indications of possible tax evasion and financial misrepresentation. While Elena had no desire to see the father of her child face criminal charges, she also recognized that these potential legal vulnerabilities gave her leverage. During her lunch break, Elena met with her financial advisor, initiating the process of securing her own assets and establishing financial boundaries that would protect her from any fallout from Martin's activities. She then visited her bank, withdrawing a significant but not suspicious amount from their joint savings account to fund her new individual account. By mid-afternoon, she sat across from Claudia Vega, the divorce attorney Lucia had recommended. A woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and penetrating eyes, Claudia projected exactly the combination of compassion and ruthless competence Elena needed. Before we discuss specific strategies, Claudia said after Elena had outlined her situation, I need to ask, are you certain you want to proceed with divorce? Many couples recover from infidelity. It's not just the affair, Elena explained. It's the systematic deception, the parallel financial life, the realization that our entire partnership has been built on quicksand. Trust once broken this comprehensively can't be restored. Claudia nodded, accepting this assessment. Then let's discuss how to protect you and your daughter. Given what you've discovered about these offshore holdings, we have several approaches available. For the next hour, they mapped out a strategy that would maximize Elena's position when she eventually confronted Martin. The key was timing. Moving too quickly would alert him, while waiting too long risked him discovering her investigation and taking countermeasures. Document everything, Claudia emphasized. And I mean everything: financial records, evidence of the affair, his comings and goings. We'll need a comprehensive picture not just for potential court proceedings, but for any negotiation leverage. When Elena left Claudia's office, she felt simultaneously drained and energized. The path ahead was clear, if challenging. For the next few weeks, she would continue her double life, the outwardly unchanged wife while secretly preparing for separation, gathering evidence and securing her position. That evening, Martin called to say he would be staying overnight in a hotel near his client's office to finalize the deal. Elena accepted this transparent lie with gracious understanding, seizing the opportunity of his absence to begin photographing and scanning relevant financial documents stored in his home office. Working methodically through file cabinets and storage boxes, Elena discovered additional pieces of the puzzle: correspondence with Cayman Islands financial institutions, documentation for property holdings in 3 countries, and most damning, evidence of systematic underreporting of income on their joint tax returns, forms she had signed trusting Martin's representations. Each discovery intensified her determination. This wasn't just about responding to betrayal. It was about reclaiming her agency, protecting her daughter's future, and ensuring that Martin's deception wouldn't leave her vulnerable. The next 3 weeks followed a similar pattern. Martin's absences became more frequent, his explanations increasingly elaborate yet paper-thin. Elena maintained her performance of the unsuspecting wife while meticulously documenting his activities and continuing her investigation into his financial labyrinth. She installed a discreet tracking application on her own phone, allowing her to document when she and Martin were in the same locations, evidence that would later support her timeline of discovery. She recorded dates, times, and details of his claimed whereabouts versus his actual locations. She photographed credit card statements, bank transfers, and relevant documents. Through careful monitoring of their joint accounts, Elena noticed another troubling pattern emerging. Martin was gradually liquidating assets and transferring funds to accounts she couldn't trace. The amounts were still relatively small, but the frequency was increasing, as if he were preparing for something. 3 weeks into her covert investigation, during another of Martin's overnight business trips, Elena received a notification from their joint investment account. A transfer of $50,000 to an unknown account had been processed. This was significantly larger than previous transfers, representing a substantial portion of their visible joint savings. Heart pounding, Elena logged into the investment platform, confirming the transaction had indeed been authorized by Martin just hours earlier. A second notification followed minutes later, another $50,000 transferred from their home equity line of credit. Elena felt momentary panic. Was Martin discovering her investigation? Was he accelerating his own plans, whatever they might be? She took a deep breath, forcing herself to analyze the situation methodically, as she would a professional case. The timing suggested not a response to her activities, which she had kept carefully concealed, but rather an escalation of whatever Martin himself was planning. If he was indeed preparing to leave, perhaps with his auburn-haired companion, these financial movements made strategic sense. Elena immediately called Claudia, despite the late hour. "He's moving larger sums now," she explained tersely. "I think we need to accelerate our timeline." "Agreed," Claudia responded, professional even at 11 p.m. "Come to my office first thing tomorrow. Bring all your documentation. It's time to move to the next phase." After ending the call, Elena sat alone in her home office, surrounded by the evidence of her husband's betrayal. A strange calm descended over her as she realized that the period of investigation was ending, and the phase of action beginning. She thought of the offshore accounts she had mapped so carefully, the hidden millions that Martin believed were his secret alone. She thought of the beautiful woman at La Cantina, who perhaps had no idea she was just one facet of Martin's elaborate deceptions. She thought of Sophia, who deserved better than a father who built his life on systematic dishonesty. Most of all, Elena thought about justice, not vengeance, but the fundamental rebalancing that comes when deception is exposed to light. Opening her laptop, she logged into her secure professional database one more time. There was one final piece of her strategy to implement before confrontation became inevitable. Using her specialized knowledge of financial systems, Elena documented the precise pathways into Martin's offshore network, account numbers, access protocols, security vulnerabilities. She wasn't yet certain how she would use this information, but she knew that when the moment came, she would be prepared. Martin had emptied their visible accounts, perhaps for his mistress or perhaps for some larger scheme she hadn't yet uncovered. But his secret fortune, the one he thought was perfectly hidden, remained vulnerable to the expertise of the wife he had underestimated. As dawn broke, Elena finally allowed herself a few hours of restless sleep, knowing that when she awoke, she would begin the final chapter of her 15-year marriage, not as a victim of betrayal, but as an architect of consequences. The notification sound on her phone woke her at 6:17 a.m. Half asleep, she unlocked the screen to find a message from their bank: "Transaction completed, $75,000 transferred from joint account." Another transfer, larger than any previous one. Fully alert now, Elena checked their accounts. Nearly empty. The joint checking account, savings account, even the fund earmarked for Sophia's education, all had been drained through a series of overnight transfers. Cold fury replaced her initial shock. This wasn't just financial infidelity. It was a direct attack on their daughter's future. Whatever reservations Elena might have had about her planned response evaporated in that moment. She dressed quickly, preparing for her meeting with Claudia and the decisive actions that would follow. As she gathered her documentation, her phone rang, Martin's name flashing on the screen. Elena hesitated, then answered with composed neutrality. "Hello? Elena, good morning." His voice was artificially bright. "Listen, something urgent has come up. A major opportunity in Los Cabos. I'm flying out this morning, might be gone for a week or so. I see, she replied, controlling the tremor in her voice. That sounds important. It is, Carino. Potentially the biggest deal of my career. I'll explain everything when I return. Kiss Sophia for me. The call ended before Elena could respond. A hasty exit strategy, she recognized. Martin was running, perhaps with his mistress, certainly with their money. Elena finished gathering her documents with methodical precision, adding the latest bank notifications to her growing file. Then she made one final call before leaving to meet Claudia. Lucia? It's time. Martin's emptied our accounts and is trying to flee. I need to implement our contingency plan now. I'm ready, her friend responded without hesitation. What do you need? Access to the Financial Intelligence Unit's tracking system. Just for an hour. There was a brief pause before Lucia answered. Elena, that's crossing a line. You know that. He's taken everything, Lucia. Everything we built, everything for Sophia's future. Another pause. My office. Side entrance. 30 minutes. Elena ended the call, a grim smile forming on her lips. Martin had emptied their accounts for his mistress and whatever future he imagined with her. But his secret fortune, those hidden millions he thought were beyond reach, was about to be frozen by the wife he had so greatly underestimated. As she drove toward Lucia's office, Elena reflected on the old saying her grandmother had often repeated, the best revenge is not served cold. It's served with interest. In Martin's case, that interest was about to become very literal indeed. Elena arrived at Lucia's office building using the side entrance as instructed. The law firm occupied 3 floors of a sleek high-rise in the financial district, but Lucia's private office was tucked away on the 18th floor, accessible through a separate elevator requiring keycard access. Elena texted her arrival, and moments later, the elevator doors opened. Lucia was waiting when Elena stepped into the corridor, her usual impeccable appearance slightly disheveled, suggesting she had rushed to meet Elena's urgent timeline. You're sure about this? Lucia asked without preamble as she ushered Elena into her office. He's left me no choice, Elena replied, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions churning inside her. This isn't just about me, Lucia. He's taken Sophia's college fund. Everything. Lucia nodded grimly, gesturing to her computer. You have 1 hour. The system logs all access, but I've routed it through a VPN that will show activity from the tax authority's main server. Still, we need to be quick. Elena set down her bag and pulled out her laptop. I don't need the full system, just the international wire transfer tracking database and the offshore account registry. I've already queued them up, Lucia confirmed, entering her credentials into the system. I'll stand watch outside. 1 hour, Elena. Not a minute more. With a reassuring squeeze of Elena's shoulder, Lucia exited, leaving her alone with some of the most powerful financial intelligence tools in the country, systems typically reserved for tracking terrorist financing, drug cartel money, and high-level financial crimes. Elena's fingers flew across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. First, she tracked the transfers Martin had made overnight, $175,000 total, routed through 3 different banks before landing in an account in Panama. The money was still there, not yet moved further, which meant he probably intended to access it in person once he arrived in Los Cabos. But that wasn't her primary target. Using the information she had painstakingly gathered over the past weeks, Elena accessed the offshore registry, drilling down to the Cayman Islands financial system. Martin's network was sophisticated but not impenetrable, especially not to someone with Elena's specialized knowledge and temporary access to these powerful tools. She located the main shell company, Acosta Global Ventures Limited, and its connection to 3 subsidiary entities, all ultimately tied to a master account at First Cayman Trust. The account balance confirmed what her investigation had suggested, $4.72 million, accumulated over years of systematic diversion from his legitimate business operations. Elena's heartbeat quickened. This was it, the secret fortune Martin had hidden from both her and the tax authorities. Now came the most delicate part of her plan. She navigated to the International Financial Intelligence Cooperation portal, a system that allowed authorities to flag suspicious accounts for monitoring or freezing across jurisdictions. Normally, such actions required judicial authorization and went through multiple levels of approval. But there were exceptions for emergency situations involving suspected financial crimes in progress. Elena's forensic accounting background had taught her exactly how these exceptions worked and how to trigger them. Creating a new case file, she uploaded the documentation she had compiled, evidence of Martin's systematic tax evasion, the pattern of suspicious transfers, the shell company structure clearly designed to hide ownership. Most crucially, she included the latest transfers from their joint accounts, framing it as an ongoing financial crime with imminent risk of asset flight. She hesitated only briefly before submitting the file with the highest priority flag, requesting immediate account freezing under the International Anti-Money Laundering Protocol. This system would automatically route the request to financial intelligence units in both Mexico and the Cayman Islands. Elena knew that once submitted, such requests typically triggered a 72-hour precautionary freeze while initial investigation occurred, more than enough time for her next steps. As a final measure, she created an anonymous tip to the tax authority about Martin's offshore holdings and history of tax evasion, scheduling it to be submitted automatically in 24 hours. This would ensure that even if the initial freeze were questioned, a formal investigation would be underway before Martin could move his assets. With 10 minutes to spare in her allotted hour, Elena carefully covered her digital tracks, closing all sessions and clearing browser histories. She texted Lucia, "Done." When Lucia returned, Elena was calmly packing her laptop. "Did you get what you needed?" Lucia asked, her expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Yes," Elena replied simply. "What happens next will take time to unfold, but the wheels are in motion." "Elena," Lucia said, her voice dropping to a whisper despite them being alone, "what exactly did you do?" "I ensured that Martin's hidden fortune will be frozen by this afternoon," Elena explained. "I didn't steal anything, I didn't break any laws. I simply made sure that the relevant authorities are aware of previously unreported assets that require investigation." Lucia's eyes widened. "That's impressively ruthless." "No," Elena corrected her, "it's justice. He built that fortune during our marriage, hid it from me, and then tried to flee with our legitimate joint funds. I'm simply ensuring that everything stops moving until proper legal processes can determine what belongs where." As they rode the elevator down together, Lucia asked, "What will you do now? Go home and wait?" Elena shook her head. "No. I'm meeting Claudia at 9. We're filing for divorce today, along with emergency orders to freeze any remaining domestic assets and establish temporary support for Sofia. And then? Then I'm going to the airport." Elena checked her watch. "Martin said he was flying to Los Cabos this morning. I need to verify that's actually where he's going." Lucia looked alarmed. "You're not confronting him there, are you?" "No," Elena assured her. "I just need confirmation of his movements for the documentation. Besides," she added with the ghost of a smile, "I want to know if he's traveling alone." They parted at the building entrance with a tight hug. "Call me if you need anything," Lucia insisted. "Day or night?" "I will," Elena promised. "And Lucia, thank you. I know what you risked for me today. What are friends for, if not to help freeze your cheating husband's secret millions?" Lucia replied with gallows humor. "Now go make him regret every lie he ever told you." Claudia Vega's office presented a stark contrast to Lucia's sleek corporate environment. Located in a converted colonial building with thick stone walls and tall windows, it projected the gravitas of old-world authority combined with modern efficiency. The divorce attorney listened without interruption as Elena detailed the morning's developments, occasionally making notes in a leather-bound journal. "You've been busy," Claudia observed when Elena finished. "The offshore account freezing is particularly creative. It might complicate matters later, but it certainly gives us leverage now." She pulled a folder from her desk drawer. "I've prepared the divorce filing as we discussed, including the emergency motions for temporary financial support and asset preservation. Given what you've told me about Martin emptying the accounts, I've added a motion for contempt and financial misconduct." Elena reviewed the documents carefully before signing. Each signature felt like both an ending and a beginning, the formal dissolution of 15 years of marriage, but also her first steps toward reclaiming her independence. "What should I expect next?" Elena asked as Claudia gathered the signed papers. "My assistant will file these immediately," Claudia explained. "Given the emergency nature of the financial motions, we should get a hearing date within 48 hours. Martin will be served wherever we can find him, Los Cabos, if that's indeed where he's gone." She leaned forward, her expression serious. "Elena, once he's served, expect escalation. Men like Martin, used to control, used to winning, don't respond well to being outmaneuvered. He'll likely try to contact you directly, possibly with threats, possibly with sudden remorse. Are you prepared for that?" Elena considered the question carefully. "Yes. I've secured a new phone with a number he doesn't have. I've changed all my passwords. And Sophia and I won't be staying at the house tonight." "Good," Claudia nodded approvingly. "And speaking of Sophia, how are you planning to tell her?" The question struck Elena with unexpected force. In her methodical planning for financial and legal contingencies, she had postponed this most difficult personal challenge, explaining to her 14-year-old daughter that her family was fracturing. "I haven't fully decided," Elena admitted. She knows something is wrong, she's perceptive. "But I haven't told her about the affair or the financial issues." "My advice," Claudia offered gently, "is to tell her soon, before she can hear it from anyone else. Keep it age-appropriate, of course. She doesn't need to know about offshore accounts, but she does need to understand that her father has made choices that have led to this separation." Elena nodded, her throat tight. "I'll talk to her tonight." As she left Claudia's office, a notification appeared on Elena's phone, an automated alert from the international financial system she had accessed earlier. Her request had been processed. The Cayman Islands Financial Authority had imposed a 10-day investigative freeze on all accounts associated with Acosta Global Ventures Limited pending review of potential financial misconduct. A cold satisfaction settled over Elena. Phase 1 of her countermeasures was complete. Martin's secret fortune was now as inaccessible to him as their joint savings were to her. The international terminal at Mexico City Airport buzzed with midday activity as Elena found a spot at a cafe with a clear view of the departures board. Martin's supposed flight to Los Cabos should be boarding in approximately 30 minutes. She sipped her coffee slowly, scanning the crowd for Martin's familiar figure. If he was truly headed to Los Cabos on business as claimed, he would be alone, probably in one of his meticulously tailored business suits, carrying his leather briefcase. 20 minutes passed with no sign of him. Elena was beginning to wonder if she had missed him, or if Los Cabos had been yet another lie, when she spotted them. Martin and the auburn-haired woman from La Cantina, walking hand in hand toward the international departures. But they weren't at the gates for Los Cabos. They were headed to the section for Caribbean destinations. Elena discreetly raised her phone, capturing several clear photos of them together. Martin was dressed casually in designer jeans and a linen shirt Elena had never seen, a stark contrast to his usual formal business attire. The woman wore a flowing summer dress and oversized sunglasses, laughing at something Martin had said. They stopped at the check-in counter for Air Cayman. Not Los Cabos. The Cayman Islands. Of course. Martin was heading directly to where his secret fortune was hidden, probably planning to access it in person to avoid any electronic trails. He couldn't have known that by the time his flight landed, those accounts would be frozen solid. Elena took several more photos as they checked in, documenting their destination. This evidence would be invaluable for the divorce proceedings, proof of his deception about his whereabouts, his relationship with the woman, and most importantly, his attempt to flee to the jurisdiction where his hidden assets were located. As they moved toward security, Martin suddenly glanced in Elena's direction. For a heart-stopping moment, she thought he had spotted her, but his gaze moved on without recognition. She was just another anonymous traveler in a busy airport. Elena waited until they had disappeared through security before leaving her observation post. On her way out of the terminal, she forwarded the photos to both Claudia and Lucia with a brief message, headed to Cayman Islands, not Los Cabos. With the woman from La Cantina, both responded almost immediately, From Claudia, excellent documentation. This confirms flight risk for the hearing. From Lucia, what perfect timing for those accounts to be frozen. He's going to have quite the surprise when he arrives. Elena managed a grim smile as she hailed a taxi. The next move would be Martin's, once he discovered his plans had been thoroughly derailed. But first, she needed to prepare Sophia for the earthquake about to shake her young life. When Elena arrived to pick up Sophia from school, she found her daughter waiting with unusual impatience. "You're late," Sophia observed as she climbed into the car, her tone carrying that particular blend of adolescent accusation and genuine concern. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. It's been a complicated day," Elena apologized, suddenly overwhelmed by the weight of the conversation that lay ahead. Sophia studied her mother's face with perceptive intensity. "Is this about you and Dad? Because Mariana's parents got divorced last year, and she said there were all these signs beforehand. Like her mom being sad all the time and her dad never being home." Elena's breath caught. Of course Sophia had noticed. Of course she had pieced things together in her own way. Children always understood more than adults gave them credit for. "We need to talk." "Yes," Elena confirmed. "But not here. How about we go to that cafe you like by the park? The one with the good hot chocolate?" Sophia nodded, her expression a mixture of dread and relief. "I knew something was wrong. Dad hasn't been home for dinner in weeks. And you've been checking your phone all the time and looking worried." The cafe was relatively quiet at this hour, the after-school crowd not yet arrived. They found a corner table away from other patrons, and Elena ordered Sophia's favorite hot chocolate and a coffee for herself. "Sophia," Elena began once their drinks arrived, "you're right that things haven't been good between your father and me lately. And today, I filed for divorce." Despite clearly suspecting this outcome, Sophia's eyes widened, her hands tightening around her mug. "Because he's cheating on you?" Elena nearly choked on her coffee. "What makes you say that?" Sophia rolled her eyes with teenage exasperation. "Mom, I'm not a baby. Dad's been wearing new clothes and that different cologne. He's always on his phone smiling at messages. Mariana said those were all the same things her dad did." Elena reached for her daughter's hand. "You're very observant, and yes, that's part of it. Your father has been seeing someone else. But that's not the only reason. There have been financial issues as well. Is that why you were so upset looking at the bank stuff on Sunday?" Sophia asked. "Yes," Elena confirmed, amazed at how much her daughter had noticed. "Your father has made some financial decisions that have put us in a difficult position. I won't go into all the details, but you should know that things might be financially tight for a while." Sophia's expression darkened. "Did he take our money?" The directness of the question caught Elena off guard. She hesitated, balancing her desire to protect Sophia from harsh realities against her commitment not to lie to her daughter. "He withdrew money from our joint accounts without discussing it with me," Elena finally explained, choosing her words carefully. "Including the fund we've been saving for your college." "That's stealing?" Sophia exclaimed, loud enough that a couple at a nearby table glanced over. "It's complicated when you're married," Elena said, lowering her voice. "But I'm working to fix the situation. Your education will be protected, I promise you that." Sophia fell silent, processing this information. Then she asked the question Elena had been dreading, "Where is Dad now? Does he know you're divorcing him?" "He's traveling," Elena replied truthfully, if incompletely. "He'll be served with the divorce papers soon. And no, we haven't spoken about it yet." "Is he with her?" "The other woman?" Elena hesitated again, then nodded. "Yes, I believe he is." Sophia's eyes welled with tears, but her expression was more anger than sadness. "I hate him." "Sophia, no," Elena said firmly. "Your father has made choices I strongly disagree with, choices that have hurt our family. But he's still your father, and despite everything, he loves you. If he loved me, he wouldn't have taken my college money." Sophia retorted, the logic of adolescence both simplistic and undeniable. Elena reached across the table to take her daughter's hands. "Listen to me. What's happening between your father and me is between adults. It's complicated and messy, and yes, he has made serious mistakes, but your relationship with him is separate from that. You're allowed to be angry with him, I certainly am, but try not to close your heart completely. Sophia withdrew her hands, crossing her arms defensively. Where are we going to live? Will we have to move schools? We're going to stay with Aunt Lucia for a few days, Elena explained. Just until I can sort some things out. But no, you won't need to change schools. I promise. More questions followed, practical concerns about belongings, schedules, holidays, whether Sophia would have to see that woman her father was with, each one revealing another facet of the emotional minefield they were now navigating. By the time they left the cafe, Sophia had cycled through anger, tears, practical logistics, and back to anger again. Elena recognized this emotional turbulence as just the beginning of what would likely be a long adjustment process. Can I at least get some things from home? Sophia asked as they returned to the car. Of course, Elena assured her. We'll go now. Pack whatever you need for the next few days. Anything else we can get later. As they drove toward the house that had been their family home for the past decade, Elena found herself viewing the familiar streets and buildings through a new lens. Each landmark seemed to carry the weight of a memory: the ice cream shop where they had celebrated Sophia's first day of kindergarten, the park where Martin had taught Sophia to ride a bike, the corner where they had watched New Year's fireworks as a family just 2 months ago. Everything looked the same, yet everything had changed. When they arrived home, Sophia went directly to her room to pack, while Elena gathered essential documents and personal items she hadn't already secured. As she moved through the house, she felt a strange detachment. This space that had been the center of her life for so long now felt like a museum of a past existence. She was in the master bedroom, collecting some clothing, when her phone rang with an unfamiliar international number. Cayman Islands area code. Martin. Elena's hand hovered over the phone. She had known this call would come, had been preparing for it, but now that the moment was here, she felt her carefully constructed composure waver. She answered on the 4th ring. Hello, Martin. What the hell have you done? His voice exploded through the speaker, a cocktail of rage and panic that confirmed he had discovered the account freeze. Elena switched to speaker mode and activated the call recording app Claudia had advised her to install. I'm not sure what you're referring to, she replied calmly. Don't play games with me. Martin shouted. My accounts are frozen. All of them. They're saying there's some kind of investigation. How unfortunate, Elena interjected, maintaining her composed tone. Though I'm curious why you're in the Cayman Islands when you told me you were going to Los Cabos for business. The momentary silence on the other end told her the hit had landed. You've been spying on me, Martin finally responded, his tone shifting from rage to a dangerous quiet. No, Martin. I've been paying attention. There's a difference. Listen to me very carefully, he continued, his voice now controlled but trembling with fury. Whatever you think you're doing, whatever you think you know, you're out of your depth. Unfreeze the accounts, Elena. Now. Or I swear you'll regret it. I can't unfreeze what I didn't freeze, Elena replied truthfully. If financial authorities have questions about your accounts, that's between you and them. You, Martin's voice cracked with disbelief. You reported me to the authorities? Your own husband? Ex-husband, soon enough, Elena corrected him. The divorce papers have been filed. You'll be served wherever you're staying in the Cayman Islands. Another silence, longer this time. When Martin spoke again, his tone had transformed completely, the rage replaced by a silky persuasiveness she recognized from his business negotiations. Elena, Carino, let's be reasonable. I know you're upset about Vanessa. Ah, so that's her name, Elena interrupted. Martin continued as if she hadn't spoken. But this is an extreme overreaction. We can discuss this like adults. There's no need for authorities or divorce papers. Come on, 15 years of marriage deserve better than this. They deserved better than your systematic deception, Elena countered. They deserved better than you emptying our accounts without a word, including Sophia's college fund. That was temporary. Martin protested. I was going to replace it all, with interest. I just needed liquidity for an investment opportunity, with Vanessa? In the Cayman Islands? Elena's voice remained steady, though her hand gripping the phone had begun to tremble. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, Martin. I understand that you've been hiding millions in offshore accounts for years while I budgeted every peso for our household. I understand that you've been living a double life. And I understand that you plan to abandon your family and disappear with both our joint savings and your secret fortune. That's not, Martin began, but Elena cut him off. Save it for your lawyer, Martin. Mine already has all the documentation. She heard him take a deep breath, clearly trying to regain control of the conversation. Elena, listen to me. Those offshore accounts, they're complicated. There are investors involved, business partners. This isn't just about us. If those accounts remain frozen, people will lose millions. Important people. A thinly veiled threat, Elena recognized. Another manipulation tactic. Then I suggest you start making calls to explain the situation to these important people, she replied. I'm sure they'll be fascinated to learn how their investments were being managed. You vindictive bye, Martin cut himself off. You have no idea what you've started. No, Martin. I know exactly what I've started, justice. You can keep Vanessa. You can even keep the money you took from our joint accounts, though you'll have to explain that to Sophia yourself. But your hidden millions? Those will remain frozen until the courts decide what portion belongs to your wife and daughter. Elena, goodbye, Martin. Communication through our lawyers from now on. She ended the call and stood motionless in the bedroom they had shared for so many years, adrenaline coursing through her body. The confrontation had gone almost exactly as she had anticipated, Martin's progression from rage to manipulation to threats following the predictable pattern of a privileged man suddenly finding himself outmaneuvered. Mom? Elena turned to find Sophia standing in the doorway, her backpack and a duffel bag at her feet, eyes wide with the unmistakable expression of someone who had overheard something they weren't meant to. How much did you hear? Elena asked quietly. Enough, Sophia replied, her voice small. Dad had secret millions? And he's with someone named Vanessa? Elena crossed the room and pulled her daughter into a tight embrace. I'm so sorry you had to hear that. I was going to explain everything more gradually. Sophia pulled back slightly to look at her mother's face. You froze his accounts? Like in a movie? Despite everything, Elena couldn't suppress a small smile at her daughter's tone, equal parts shock and admiration. Not exactly like in a movie, she explained. I made sure the proper authorities were aware of financial irregularities. The freezing was their decision. Sophia considered this with surprising solemnity for a 14-year-old. Good, she finally declared. He deserves it. A knock at the front door interrupted the moment. Elena checked her watch. It was too early for Lucia to have arrived to pick them up. Stay here, she instructed Sophia, moving cautiously toward the entryway. Through the peephole, she saw two men in suits standing on the porch, their posture and demeanor unmistakably official. Elena took a deep breath and opened the door. Mrs. Acosta? The older of the two men inquired. Yes, she confirmed. I'm Agent Ramirez with the Financial Intelligence Unit, and this is Agent Mendoza, he continued, both men presenting their credentials. We'd like to ask you some questions about certain financial activities associated with your husband, Martin Acosta. Elena had anticipated this possibility. Her anonymous tip in the international account freeze would naturally trigger an investigation. What she hadn't expected was how quickly they would appear at her door. Of course, she replied calmly, though I should inform you that I've filed for divorce from Mr. Acosta today, and I've only recently become aware of certain irregularities in his financial activities. Agent Ramirez's expression remained professional, but Elena detected a flicker of interest. We understand this may be a difficult time, Mrs. Acosta. However, your cooperation could be very important to our investigation. I'm happy to cooperate fully, Elena assured them. Would you like to come in, or would you prefer I come to your office? If you could come to our office tomorrow morning, that would be preferable, Agent Mendoza spoke for the first time. We'll need to take a formal statement." Of course, Elena agreed. "Though I should tell you that I won't be staying here tonight. My daughter and I are temporarily relocating for personal safety reasons." Both agents exchanged glances. "Is there a specific threat we should be aware of, Mrs. Acosta?" Agent Ramirez asked. Elena considered her answer carefully. "Not a direct physical threat, no. But given the circumstances of Mr. Acosta's departure and certain statements he made in our last conversation, I felt it prudent to stay elsewhere temporarily." Agent Ramirez handed her his card. "If that changes, if you receive any threatening communication, please contact me immediately. Financial investigations sometimes create volatile situations." Elena nodded, accepting the card. "I understand. I'll see you tomorrow morning at your office." After arranging the details for her interview the next day, the agents departed. Elena closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. The machinery of justice had begun moving with unexpected speed. Martin's financial house of cards was collapsing even faster than she had anticipated. Sophia appeared from the hallway, her eyes wide. "Were those cops? Is Dad going to jail?" Elena moved to her daughter, placing gentle hands on her shoulders. "They're financial investigators, not police. And I don't know what will happen with your father. That depends on exactly what they find and what he's done." "But he might go to jail?" Sophia pressed. "It's possible," Elena admitted, seeing no point in shielding her from this reality. "If he's broken serious financial laws, yes, there could be legal consequences. But that's not the outcome I'm seeking, Sophia. I just want what's fair for us, for you." Sophia absorbed this with a maturity that both impressed and saddened Elena. No 14-year-old should have to contemplate their father facing potential criminal charges. "I'm ready to go," Sophia finally said, gesturing to her bags. "I don't want to be here if he comes back." "He won't be back tonight," Elena assured her, knowing Martin was thousands of miles away. "But you're right, it's time to go. And Lucia will be here soon." As they waited for Lucia to arrive, Elena sent a brief update to Claudia about the financial investigator's visit. The pieces were moving now, beyond her control in many ways. She had set events in motion that would have far-reaching consequences, for Martin, certainly, but also for herself and Sophia. Lucia arrived 30 minutes later, helping them load their essential belongings into her car. As they pulled away from the house, Elena glanced back at what had been her home for the past decade. Despite everything that had happened, despite the betrayal and deception that had poisoned what she had once believed was a solid marriage, she felt an unexpected pang of grief. Not for the loss of Martin, that grief would come later, in its own way, but for the loss of the life she had thought they were building together. The shared dreams, the future plans, the family unit that Sophia had grown up within. All built on a foundation of lies that had finally crumbled. As they drove through the evening traffic toward Lucia's apartment, Elena's phone buzzed with an email notification. A court date had been set for the emergency financial hearing, 10 a.m., 2 days from now. Martin would be served with the divorce papers and hearing notice at his hotel in the Cayman Islands by tomorrow morning. The wheels of justice, both legal and personal, were now firmly in motion. Martin had emptied their accounts for his mistress, but Elena had frozen his secret fortune. The next moves in this high-stakes game would unfold in court, where Elena intended to ensure that justice prevailed not just for herself, but for Sophia. What Martin had failed to understand throughout their 15 years together was that Elena's meticulous nature, the very quality he had often teased her about, had become his undoing. He had underestimated her intelligence, her resourcefulness, and most fatally, her determination to protect what was rightfully hers. As Lucia's car turned onto the expressway, Sophia leaned against Elena's shoulder, exhaustion finally overtaking the tumultuous emotions of the day. Elena wrapped an arm around her daughter, drawing strength from the knowledge that whatever challenges lay ahead, this precious bond, was worth every battle. The sun was setting over Mexico City, casting long shadows across the urban landscape. For Martin, currently raging in a luxury hotel room in the Cayman Islands, it was the darkness of an ending. But for Elena, despite the pain and uncertainty, It felt strangely like the beginning of a new dawn. Elena woke before dawn in Lucia's guest bedroom, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. The events of the previous day crashed back into her consciousness: the account freezes, the divorce filing, the confrontation with Martin, the visit from financial investigators. She checked her phone, 5:17 a.m., no new messages. Beside her, Sophia slept soundly, her face peaceful in repose, temporarily free from the emotional turmoil that had marked her waking hours. Elena slipped quietly from the bed, careful not to disturb her daughter's rest. There would be time enough for reality later. In the kitchen, she found Lucia already awake, dressed in running clothes and sipping an espresso. "You're up early," Elena observed, gratefully accepting the cup Lucia poured for her. "Couldn't sleep," Lucia admitted. "Too busy thinking about what a magnificent chess player you'd make. You're 3 moves ahead of Martin at every turn." Elena smiled faintly. "Chess assumes both players are following the same rules. Martin abandoned the rulebook years ago. I'm just finally playing his game." "Fair point," Lucia conceded. "Speaking of which, I received an interesting call last night after you went to bed." Elena raised an eyebrow questioningly. "Ricardo Vargas," Lucia explained. "From the offshore banking division at Banco Nacional." "Martin's personal banker," Elena noted, instantly alert. "What did he want?" "To discreetly inquire whether I might be representing Martin Acosta in some sort of misunderstanding with financial authorities," Lucia replied, a note of dry amusement in her voice. "Apparently, Martin has been calling everyone in his network, trying to get the freeze lifted." "And what did you tell Senor Vargas?" "That I don't represent Martin, have no knowledge of his financial affairs, and as a general policy, don't discuss potential clients with third parties," Lucia answered. "But the call itself is telling. Martin's getting desperate." Elena nodded thoughtfully. The account freeze wasn't just about securing assets for the divorce. It was about exposing his network. Every person he contacts to help him is another threat for investigators to pull. "Exactly," Lucia confirmed. "And speaking of investigators, are you prepared for your interview today?" "As prepared as I can be," Elena replied. "I'll tell them exactly what I know, which is the truth. I only recently discovered Martin's offshore holdings. I have legitimate concerns about tax evasion and financial misconduct, and I'm fully cooperating with their investigation." Lucia studied her friend's face. "Are you certain you're ready for what might come next? If the authorities determine there's been serious tax fraud or money laundering, this goes beyond divorce. Martin could face criminal charges." The question hung in the air between them. Elena had been asking herself the same thing since she'd set these events in motion. Was she prepared to see the father of her child potentially go to prison? "I didn't create this situation," Elena finally answered. "Martin made his choices, every deception, every hidden transfer, every falsified tax document. I'm not seeking vengeance, Lucia. I'm seeking justice. Whatever that entails." Lucia nodded, accepting her friend's resolve. "Then let's get you ready for today. First the financial investigators, then preparing for tomorrow's emergency hearing." The offices of the Financial Intelligence Unit occupied 3 floors of an anonymous government building in the administrative district. Despite the early hour, the reception area buzzed with the quiet efficiency of an organization that never truly slept. Financial crimes respected no time zones or business hours. Elena was escorted to a conference room where agents Ramirez and Mendoza awaited her, along with a third person who introduced herself as Analyst Torres from the tax authority. "Thank you for coming in so promptly, Mrs. Acosta," Agent Ramirez began once they were seated. "Ms. Morales, please," Elena corrected gently. "I've initiated divorce proceedings and will be reverting to my maiden name." "Of course, Ms. Morales," Ramirez acknowledged. "Before we begin formally, I want to clarify that you are not under investigation yourself. Based on preliminary review, we understand you've been filing joint tax returns with your husband but may have been unaware of certain undisclosed financial activities." "That's correct," Elena confirmed. "As I mentioned yesterday, I only recently discovered the extent of my husband's offshore holdings." "We appreciate your cooperation," Ramirez continued. We'll be recording this conversation, and analyst Torres will be taking notes. You have the right to have legal representation present, though as you're not a subject of investigation, it's not required. I understand, Elena replied. I'm comfortable proceeding without representation. For the next 2 hours, Elena detailed her discoveries about Martin's financial activities, beginning with the initial discrepancies she had noticed and culminating in her comprehensive mapping of his offshore network. She explained her professional background in forensic accounting and how she had applied those skills to uncovering the truth. She carefully omitted her role in triggering the account freeze, presenting her actions as those of a concerned spouse documenting potentially illicit activity. It wasn't a lie, not exactly, but a strategic omission that both protected her and maintained the integrity of the investigation. Based on your professional expertise, Agent Mendoza asked, what would you estimate to be the total value of these undisclosed assets? Approximately $4.7 million in the Cayman Islands accounts, Elena replied. But there may be additional holdings I haven't been able to trace. Martin maintained properties in multiple countries through shell companies. The total could be significantly higher. And to your knowledge, was any of this disclosed on your joint tax returns over the years? Analyst Torres inquired. No, Elena stated unequivocally. I reviewed our tax filings for the past 5 years specifically looking for this. There's no mention of these offshore entities or the income they generated. The questions continued methodically, covering timelines, specific transactions, entities involved, and Martin's business associates. Elena provided precise, detailed answers, occasionally consulting the notes she had brought. You mentioned your husband recently emptied your joint accounts, Agent Ramirez noted. Approximately how much was involved? $175,000 in total, Elena replied, including $50,000 from her daughter's college fund. And do you know where these funds were transferred? Initially to an account in Panama, Elena explained. I haven't been able to track them beyond that point. One final question, Ms. Morales, Ramirez said, leaning forward slightly. Have you had any communication with your husband since discovering these activities? One phone call yesterday, Elena confirmed. He contacted me after discovering the freeze on his Cayman accounts. I recorded the conversation per my divorce attorney's advice. This caught the investigators' interest immediately. Would you be willing to share that recording with us? Mendoza asked. Of course, Elena agreed, pulling out her phone. He made several concerning statements about the accounts, including references to important people whose investments might be affected. She played the recording, watching the investigators exchange glances at certain points in Martin's tirade. When it concluded, Agent Ramirez thanked her and explained the next steps in their process. We'll continue our investigation based on the information you've provided. It would be helpful if you could share your documentation of the offshore network. And we may need to speak with you again as things develop. I'm happy to help however I can, Elena assured them, transferring her files to the secure drive analyst Torres provided. I assume I should not discuss this investigation with anyone. That would be preferable, Ramirez confirmed. Though you can, of course, inform your divorce attorney that you've cooperated with our inquiry. As she prepared to leave, Agent Ramirez added, Ms. Morales, given the nature of this case and your husband's apparent awareness that his financial activities are under scrutiny, I'd recommend continued caution regarding your personal safety and that of your daughter. Do you have specific concerns? Elena asked, her protective instincts immediately heightened. Nothing specific, Ramirez clarified. But in our experience, when individuals with significant hidden assets feel cornered, unpredictable behavior sometimes follows. Just remain vigilant. The warning, though delivered in measured tones, sent a chill through Elena. She had been so focused on the financial and legal aspects of confronting Martin's betrayal that she hadn't fully considered potential physical risks. I understand, she acknowledged soberly. We're currently staying with a friend rather than at her home. Good, Ramirez nodded approvingly. If you notice anything concerning unusual vehicles in your vicinity, unexpected contacts from your husband's associates, any form of intimidation, please contact us immediately. When Elena emerged from the government building, she found Claudia waiting for her in a nearby cafe as arranged. "How did it go?" the divorce attorney asked as Elena sat down. "Thoroughly," Elena replied. "They now have all the documentation I compiled on Martin's offshore network, plus the recording of our phone conversation yesterday." "Perfect," Claudia nodded approvingly. "This strengthens our position for tomorrow's hearing immeasurably. If financial authorities are actively investigating Martin for potential tax crimes, the judge will be even more inclined to grant our emergency motions." The agent seemed particularly interested when Martin mentioned important people with investments in his offshore accounts, Elena noted. "I got the impression they think this might extend beyond just Martin's personal tax evasion." "It wouldn't surprise me," Claudia remarked. "Men like Martin rarely operate in isolation. These networks tend to be interconnected, wealthy individuals helping each other hide assets, often with the assistance of professional facilitators." She sipped her coffee before continuing. "Now, let's discuss tomorrow's hearing. Martin has been served with the papers at his hotel in the Cayman Islands. His local attorney, Javier Robles, has filed an appearance and will be representing him remotely." "Robles," Elena repeated. "Isn't he primarily a criminal defense attorney?" "Indeed," Claudia confirmed with a thin smile. "An interesting choice for what's ostensibly just a divorce hearing, wouldn't you say?" Martin is clearly anticipating the criminal implications of what's unfolding. They spent the next hour reviewing their strategy for the hearing. Claudia had prepared comprehensive documentation of Martin's financial misconduct, from the original discovery of offshore accounts to the recent emptying of joint accounts. Combined with the evidence of his attempt to flee to the Cayman Islands under false pretenses, they had a compelling case for the emergency orders they were seeking. "The most challenging aspect may be determining fair temporary support," Claudia explained. "Normally, this would be calculated based on documented income. But given Martin's hidden assets and our lack of access to accurate financial information, I've prepared projections based on what I've been able to document," Elena replied, producing a spreadsheet from her bag. "Conservative estimates of his true income, our household expenses, and Sophia's needs." Claudia reviewed the numbers, nodding appreciatively. "This is excellent, Elena. Clear, reasonable, and thoroughly documented. Judges appreciate this level of preparation." As they concluded their meeting, Claudia asked, "How is Sophia holding up?" "As well as can be expected," Elena sighed. "She's angry, hurt, confused, all the emotions you'd expect. But she's also remarkably resilient. She's spending today with Lucia's niece, who's close to her age. I thought a day of normal teenage activities might give her some breathing space." "Good instinct," Claudia approved. "Children need structure and normalcy during family crises." "And what about you? How are you holding up?" The question caught Elena off guard. She had been so focused on the practical aspects of the situation, the investigation, the hearing, Sophia's well-being, that she had barely considered her own emotional state. "I'm functioning," she finally answered. "There will be time to process everything emotionally later. Right now, I need to remain clear-headed." Claudia reached across the table to briefly squeeze Elena's hand. "That's understandable. Just remember that compartmentalizing has its limits. At some point, you'll need to acknowledge the personal impact of all this." Elena nodded, knowing Claudia was right but unable to imagine when or how she would begin to process the collapse of her 15-year marriage, the comprehensive betrayal by the man she had built a life with, and the uncertain future she now faced. "One day at a time," she murmured. "Today is about preparation. Tomorrow is about the hearing. Everything else can wait." That evening, as Elena helped Sophia organize her school materials for the following day, her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Local area code, not international. Her finger hovered over the decline button, but something prompted her to answer. "Elena Morales," she answered cautiously. "Ms. Morales, this is Vanessa Ortiz." The name registered immediately, Martin's mistress. The auburn-haired woman from La Cantina. Elena's hand tightened around the phone. "How did you get this number?" she asked, keeping her voice level. "Through a mutual acquaintance," Vanessa replied vaguely. "I need to speak with you about Martin." Elena moved to the guest bedroom, closing the door to ensure Sophia wouldn't overhear. "I have nothing to say to you, Ms. Ortiz, and I can't imagine what you could possibly have to say to me that would be of interest." "I understand your hostility," Vanessa continued, her voice surprisingly steady. "But this isn't what you think. I'm not calling to defend Martin or interfere with your divorce. I'm calling because I believe you and I may have been victims of the same man, albeit in different ways." Elena's initial anger gave way to cautious curiosity. "Go on." "Not over the phone," Vanessa insisted. "Can we meet?" "Tomorrow, perhaps?" "I have information about Martin's financial activities that I think you should know, information that might be relevant to your legal proceedings." Every instinct told Elena this could be a trap, Martin using his mistress to manipulate her somehow. And yet, something in Vanessa's tone rang true. A note of urgency, perhaps even fear. "Why would you help me?" Elena challenged. "You're the woman who's been seeing my husband behind my back. The woman he emptied our accounts for." "That's not entirely accurate," Vanessa replied carefully. "But I understand why you see it that way. All I'm asking is 30 minutes of your time, in public, wherever you feel comfortable. After that, if you want nothing more to do with me, I'll respect that." Elena considered the request. If Vanessa truly had relevant information about Martin's finances, it could be valuable for both the divorce proceedings and the ongoing investigation. The risk seemed manageable if they met in a public place. "Tomorrow is my court hearing for emergency orders," Elena explained. "I can meet you at 2 p.m. at the cafe in the Central Library. It's public, always crowded." "I'll be there," Vanessa agreed quickly. Don't thank me yet," Elena interrupted. "I haven't decided whether to believe anything you might tell me." "And Miss Ortiz? If this is some kind of ploy orchestrated by Martin, be aware that I'm not as easily manipulated as he might have led you to believe." After ending the call, Elena sat motionless on the edge of the bed, processing this unexpected development. She debated whether to tell Claudia or Lucia about the planned meeting but decided against it for now. She would hear what Vanessa had to say first, then determine if it warranted sharing. The prospect of coming face to face with the woman who represented Martin's betrayal filled Elena with a complex mix of emotions: anger, curiosity, dread, and an unexpected flutter of something like anticipation. Whatever game Vanessa was playing, Elena was determined not to be an unwitting pawn. The morning of the emergency hearing dawned with a clarity that seemed at odds with the turbulence of Elena's circumstances. She dressed with deliberate care in a conservative navy suit, pearl earrings, and minimal makeup, projecting the image of a responsible professional and mother rather than a vengeful wife. Sophia had insisted on attending the hearing despite Elena's initial reluctance. "It's my life too, Mom," she had argued with the absolute conviction of adolescence. "I want to see what happens." After consulting with Claudia, who suggested that having Sophia present might actually strengthen their position with the judge, Elena had relented. Sophia now sat beside her in the courthouse corridor, solemn in a school uniform they had retrieved from home the previous evening. "Remember what we discussed?" Elena reminded her daughter gently. "The judge might ask you some questions, but only about practical matters, where you're living, your school situation, your daily routine. You won't be asked to choose between your father and me or to comment on adult issues." Sophia nodded, absently straightening her uniform skirt. "Do you think Dad will be there?" she asked, her voice smaller than usual. "No, sweetie," Elena explained. "He's still in the Cayman Islands. His lawyer will represent him via video conference." "Good," Sophia declared with sudden vehemence. "I don't want to see him." Before Elena could respond, Claudia appeared, immaculately professional in a charcoal suit, carrying her signature leather portfolio. "We're scheduled to begin in 15 minutes, she informed them. "Judge Hernandez is presiding. She's known for being thorough but fair, particularly in cases involving financial misconduct." "Has there been any response from Martin's attorney beyond the initial appearance?" Elena inquired. "Just received," Claudia confirmed, her expression suggesting the news was significant. "They are not contesting the temporary support or the asset freeze order." Elena's eyebrows rose in surprise. "That's Unexpected. Martin doesn't surrender easily, especially not when money is involved. Indeed, Claudia agreed. Which suggests either a strategic decision to focus on the bigger picture, the criminal investigation, or perhaps she glanced meaningfully at Sophia before continuing more carefully. Perhaps external factors limiting his options. The implication was clear. The financial intelligence investigation might already be constraining Martin's movements and decisions more than they had anticipated. They were called into the courtroom precisely on schedule. Judge Hernandez, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and piercing eyes behind rimless glasses, commanded the space with quiet authority. On a large screen at the side of the courtroom, Martin's attorney, Javier Robles, appeared via video link, his expression impassive. This is an emergency hearing regarding case number 2025 FC 4872, Morales v. Acosta, Judge Hernandez began. I've reviewed the filings from both parties. Before we proceed, I want to clarify that this hearing is limited to temporary orders regarding support and asset preservation. Substantive issues of property division and final custody arrangements will be addressed in subsequent proceedings. She looked directly at Elena. Ms. Morales, one understand your daughter is present in the courtroom? Yes, Your Honor, Elena confirmed. Sophia is 14 and wanted to attend, with the understanding that her participation would be limited to factual matters regarding her living situation and needs. Judge Hernandez nodded approvingly. That's appropriate. Sophia, thank you for being here. I may have a few questions for you later, but for now, you're welcome to observe. The proceedings moved efficiently through the initial presentations. Claudia outlined the circumstances that necessitated emergency orders, Martin's emptying of joint accounts, his departure to the Cayman Islands under false pretenses, and the discovery of previously undisclosed offshore assets. Ms. Morales is not seeking punitive measures, Your Honor, Claudia emphasized. She is simply requesting sufficient support for herself and her daughter while these proceedings continue, as well as preservation of remaining marital assets to prevent further dissipation. When it was Robles' turn to respond, his approach surprised Elena. Your Honor, my client does not contest the requests for temporary support or the asset preservation order, the attorney stated. Mr. Acosta acknowledges transferring funds from joint accounts for investment purposes but fully intends to provide appropriate support for his daughter. He requests only that the court recognize certain assets as separate property rather than marital assets, specifically those held through his international business entities. Judge Hernandez's expression revealed nothing as she made notes. Mr. Robles, is your client available to address the court directly today? Regrettably, no, Your Honor, Robles replied smoothly. Mr. Acosta is currently addressing urgent business matters that prevent his appearance. He has authorized me to speak on his behalf. I see, the judge responded, her tone suggesting she found this explanation inadequate. And these urgent business matters, would they be related to the ongoing financial intelligence investigation referenced in Ms. Morales' filings? Robles hesitated fractionally. Your Honor, I'm not at liberty to discuss matters that may be under investigation. However, I can assure the court that Mr. Acosta is cooperating fully with all relevant authorities. Judge Hernandez turned her attention back to Claudia and Elena. Ms. Vega, does your client have documentation regarding the financial needs for herself and the minor child? Yes, Your Honor, Claudia replied, presenting the detailed projections Elena had prepared. These figures represent the actual household expenses and Sophia's needs, based on documented costs over the past year. The judge reviewed the documents carefully. These seem reasonable and well substantiated. She turned to the screen. Mr. Robles, does your client have any objection to these support calculations? No, Your Honor, Robles confirmed. Mr. Acosta is prepared to provide support in the requested amount on a temporary basis, without prejudice to final support determinations. The hearing continued with questions about Sophia's schooling, living arrangements, and immediate needs. Sophia answered the judge's questions with composure beyond her years, explaining that she wished to continue at her current school and that she felt safe staying with her mother at Lucia's apartment temporarily. After all evidence had been presented, Judge Hernandez delivered her ruling efficiently, The court grants the requested emergency orders as follows: temporary spousal and child support in the amount specified in petitioner's Exhibit A, to be paid by respondent within 48 hours and continuing monthly thereafter. A temporary freeze on all known marital assets pending further determination of property division. Temporary primary residential custody of Sophia to the petitioner, with visitation rights for respondent to be determined at a subsequent hearing. She paused, then added, additionally, given the circumstances described regarding respondent's removal of funds from joint accounts and departure from the country, the court orders respondent to provide a full accounting of all assets, domestic and international, within 30 days. Failure to comply with this order may result in sanctions, including adverse inferences regarding asset division. With a final tap of her gavel, the hearing concluded. Elena felt a complex mixture of relief and apprehension. The emergency orders provided immediate financial security for herself and Sophia, but Martin's uncharacteristic lack of resistance suggested he was focused on bigger concerns, likely the criminal investigation. As they exited the courtroom, Sophia squeezed Elena's hand. "Mom, is it over now?" "Just this part, sweetheart," Elena replied honestly. "There's still a long process ahead for the divorce and everything else." "But we won today, right?" Sophia pressed, seeking reassurance. "It's not about winning or losing," Elena explained gently. "It's about making sure we're protected while everything gets sorted out. And yes, in that sense, we achieved what we needed today." Claudia joined them in the corridor, her expression satisfied. "That went as well as we could have hoped." Judge Hernandez clearly understood the situation and responded appropriately. Martin's lack of opposition to the support order is interesting, suggests he's saving his resources for the bigger battle. "The criminal investigation," Elena concluded. "Precisely," Claudia confirmed. "Speaking of which, have you heard anything more from the financial intelligence agents?" "Not yet," Elena replied, "though I expect I will soon, especially after today's hearing." Martin's attorney essentially confirmed he's under investigation by dodging the judge's direct question. They discussed next steps briefly before parting ways, with Claudia promising to send the formal court orders as soon as they were processed. Elena checked her watch, still 3 hours before her scheduled meeting with Vanessa. "How about lunch and then some shopping?" she suggested to Sophia. "We need to get you some more clothes and things since we're staying at Aunt Lucia's for a while." Sophia agreed readily, the ordinary suggestion of shopping momentarily lifting the weight of recent events from her young shoulders. For a few hours, as they browsed stores and shared lunch at a favorite restaurant, they almost felt like their normal selves, just a mother and daughter enjoying a day together. But as the appointed meeting time with Vanessa approached, Elena's tension returned. She arranged for Sophia to spend the afternoon with Lucia's niece again, explaining that she had a follow-up meeting related to the hearing. The Central Library Cafe was busy as predicted, providing both the public setting Elena had insisted upon and enough ambient noise to ensure private conversation. She arrived 15 minutes early, selecting a table with a clear view of both entrances and her back to a wall, a defensive positioning she hadn't consciously planned but that reflected her heightened vigilance. At precisely 2 p.m., Vanessa Ortiz entered the cafe. In person, without Martin beside her, she appeared younger than Elena had estimated, perhaps late 20s rather than 30. She wore simple jeans and a white blouse, her auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She scanned the space with evident nervousness before spotting Elena. As Vanessa approached the table, Elena studied her with clinical detachment. This woman had been sleeping with her husband, possibly for months. She represented the most personal aspect of Martin's betrayal. And yet, looking at her now, Elena felt an unexpected absence of hatred. This young woman might have been complicit in Martin's deception, but she hadn't made vows to Elena. Martin had. "Ms. Morales," Vanessa greeted her, voice slightly unsteady. "Thank you for meeting me." "Sit down, Ms. Ortiz," Elena replied evenly. "You said you had information about Martin's financial activities." "I'm listening." Vanessa took the seat across from Elena, placing a thin folder on the table between them. "Before I show you this, I need to clarify something. I'm not Martin's mistress, at least, not in the way you think." Elena's expression hardened. If you've come to tell me your relationship with my husband is somehow legitimate or justified, no, Vanessa interrupted with unexpected firmness. I'm trying to tell you that my relationship with Martin was never romantic or sexual. It was professional. This caught Elena off guard. Professional? What exactly is your profession, Ms. Ortiz? I'm a financial consultant specializing in strategic investments and asset protection, Vanessa explained, or at least, that's what Martin hired me to be. In reality, he was using my credentials and expertise to structure his offshore holdings. Elena's forensic accounting mind immediately processed the implications. You're saying you helped him hide assets? Initially, yes, Vanessa admitted, her discomfort evident. He approached me about 9 months ago, claiming he needed help protecting legitimate business assets from predatory litigation. It seemed reasonable at first. Many high-net-worth individuals seek legal asset protection. But it wasn't legitimate, Elena concluded. No, Vanessa confirmed. As I worked more closely with his finances, I began to see patterns that concerned me. Systematic underreporting of income. Shell companies with no apparent business purpose. Cash transactions structured to avoid reporting thresholds. She pushed the folder toward Elena. 3 months ago, I confronted him about my concerns. He assured me everything was above board, just aggressive tax planning. But I started documenting discrepancies anyway, protecting myself. Elena opened the folder to find meticulously organized records, transaction histories, entity formation documents, bank statements, and handwritten notes detailing conversations with Martin. 2 weeks ago, Vanessa continued, Martin called me urgently, saying he needed to move substantial assets immediately. When I questioned why, he became threatening. Said I was either with him or against him. That's when I realized I might be implicated in something much worse than aggressive tax avoidance. Elena looked up from the documents. If you're not his mistress, why were you dining with him at La Cantina? Why are you in Mexico City rather than the Cayman Islands with him? The dinners were work meetings, Vanessa explained. As for why I'm here, I never went to the Cayman Islands. I was supposed to, but after his threatening behavior, I cancelled at the last minute. Told him I'd meet him there in a few days. He was furious but couldn't force me onto the plane. She hesitated before adding, the woman you may have seen him with at the airport wasn't me. Martin maintains relationships with several women. I met one of them once, Adriana, I think. Tall, auburn hair like mine. The revelation struck Elena with unexpected force. Not just one affair, but multiple women. The betrayal was even more comprehensive than she had imagined. Why are you sharing this with me now? Elena asked, her professional skepticism reasserting itself. If you were involved in potentially illegal financial activities, coming forward puts you at risk. Because I'm already at risk, Vanessa replied frankly. When news of the account freeze reached me, I knew it was only a matter of time before investigators traced the structures back to me. My professional reputation, possibly my freedom, is on the line. She leaned forward, her expression earnest. I'm meeting with financial authorities tomorrow to voluntarily disclose everything I know. But I wanted you to have this information first, for your divorce case. Martin has more hidden assets than what you've frozen, assets I helped structure but that aren't in the documentation you provided to the court. Elena held Vanessa's gaze, searching for deception and finding none. How do you know what documentation I provided? Martin told me, Vanessa admitted. He called last night, raging about you freezing his main accounts but gloating that you had missed the big money. That's when I knew I needed to come forward. Elena's mind raced through the implications. If Vanessa was telling the truth, there were additional hidden assets beyond what she had discovered. Assets that could materially affect the divorce settlement and, potentially, the criminal investigation. Where? Elena asked simply. Where's the big money? Singapore, Vanessa replied without hesitation. Through a complex structure of investment entities that technically belong to a family trust based in Liechtenstein. Martin is a beneficial owner, though his name appears nowhere in the official documentation. The approximate value is $12 million. The figure nearly took Elena's breath away. $12 million, nearly 3 times what she had discovered in the Cayman accounts, all hidden, all undeclared, all built during their marriage. I have the complete documentation here, Vanessa continued, tapping the folder. Account numbers, access protocols, entity structures. Everything the authorities, and you, will need. Elena studied the young woman across from her, reassessing her initial judgments. Not Martin's mistress, but perhaps another kind of victim, a professional exploited for her expertise and now at risk of being sacrificed to protect him. Why didn't she go to the authorities first? Elena questioned. Why come to me? Because this isn't just about legal justice, Vanessa answered softly. It's about personal justice too. Martin used me professionally, just as he betrayed you personally. I thought you deserved to know the full truth before anyone else. The sincerity in her voice was convincing, but Elena remained cautious. I appreciate the information, Ms. Ortiz. I'll need to verify it independently and discuss it with my attorney before taking any action. Of course, Vanessa agreed readily. I expected nothing less from someone with your professional background. All I ask is that when you do act on this information, you acknowledge that I came forward voluntarily. It might make a difference when I meet with the authorities tomorrow. As they concluded their meeting, Elena found herself in the unexpected position of feeling a certain solidarity with this woman she had previously viewed as her enemy. Both of them had been deceived by Martin, albeit in different ways. Both were now seeking to reclaim their power and ensure justice. Ms. Ortiz, Elena said as they prepared to part ways, whatever happens next, thank you for your courage in coming forward. Vanessa offered a tentative smile. Martin always said you were formidable. I can see now that he underestimated you significantly. Good luck with what lies ahead. That evening, after Elena had shared the revelations from her meeting with Claudia and confirmed an urgent appointment with the financial investigators for the following day, she sat on Lucia's balcony watching the city lights flicker to life. Sophia was inside, video chatting with school friends, temporarily distracted from the upheaval of their lives. Elena's phone rang, the same international number from the Cayman Islands. Martin again. She considered ignoring it but decided knowledge was power. She answered, activating the recording function as before. Hello, Martin. The court ordered me to pay support, he stated without preamble, his tone tightly controlled. I suppose you think you've won. This isn't a competition, Elena replied evenly. It's about providing for Sophia while we resolve our separation. Always so reasonable, Martin sneered. So measured. Tell me, did you enjoy playing detective? Digging through my private financial affairs? Reporting me to authorities like a common criminal? Did you enjoy emptying our daughter's college fund? Elena countered. Or maintaining multiple affairs while pretending to be working late? A brief silence followed before Martin spoke again, his voice dangerously soft. You have no idea what you've started, Elena. The Cayman accounts, a drop in the bucket. You think you've hurt me, but you've barely scratched the surface. Singapore, Elena stated simply. Another silence, longer this time. When Martin spoke again, the false confidence had vanished from his voice. What did you say? I said Singapore. The Liechtenstein Family Trust. $12 million. Ring any bells? Who told you? Martin stopped abruptly. Vanessa, that treacherous little. It's fascinating how quickly you assume betrayal, Elena remarked coolly, rather than considering that your own actions might have consequences. Martin's breathing was audible through the phone, heavy and irregular. You don't understand what you're dealing with. This goes beyond us, beyond our marriage. There are people involved who don't appreciate having their hidden millions frozen. Elena finished for him. Yes, you mentioned these important people before. Another attempt to intimidate me, I suppose. This isn't intimidation, it's a warning, Martin hissed. For your own protection. And Sophia's. The implied threat against their daughter sent a chill through Elena, followed immediately by a surge of protective fury. Let me be perfectly clear, Martin. If anything at all, happens to Sophia or me, the authorities will receive every document, every recording, every piece of evidence I've compiled about your activities and those of your associates. It's all securely stored with instructions for immediate release if we're harmed in any way." She paused, letting the implication sink in before continuing in a measured tone. "I imagine your important people would be quite displeased to discover you created such a vulnerability." The silence that followed told Elena her countermeasure had hit its mark. When Martin spoke again, his voice had lost its threatening edge, replaced by a calculated reasonableness. "This has gotten out of hand," he said. "We both want what's best for Sophia. Why don't we meet, just the two of us, and discuss a resolution that works for everyone? No lawyers, no authorities, just a conversation between parents." "I don't think so," Elena replied firmly. "Any communication between us will continue through our attorneys." "And Martin?" "The Singapore accounts will be reported to the authorities tomorrow, just as the Cayman accounts were. Whatever game you're playing, whatever you're hiding, it's over." "Elena, wait." She ended the call, her hand trembling slightly despite her outward composure. Martin's veiled threat against Sophia had crossed a line she hadn't anticipated even he would dare approach. Whatever remaining doubts she might have harbored about pursuing this course to its conclusion vanished in that moment. Lucia appeared in the doorway to the balcony, her expression concerned. "Everything okay?" "I couldn't help overhearing your tone." "Martin just implicitly threatened Sophia," Elena explained, still processing her own anger. "He's panicking." Lucia's eyes widened. "That's escalation." "Do you think he'd actually—" "No," Elena interrupted, shaking her head firmly. "It was a desperate attempt to regain control. Martin's manipulative, not violent. But I've recorded the conversation and I'll be sharing it with both Claudia and the investigators." She glanced through the window to where Sophia sat on the couch, headphones on, still chatting with her friends, blissfully unaware of the new tensions. "Still," Elena continued, "we should be cautious. No mention of our specific whereabouts on social media. Sophia should be accompanied to and from school, and I think it's time to consider more permanent living arrangements than your guest room." Lucia nodded in agreement. "My building has a vacancy, 2-bedroom unit on the 12th floor. Security desk in the lobby, restricted elevator access. I can speak to the property manager tomorrow." Elena felt a rush of gratitude for her friend's unwavering support. "Thank you for everything." "What are you going to do about the Singapore accounts?" Lucia asked. "First thing tomorrow, I'm meeting with the financial investigators to share Vanessa's information. Then Claudia will file amended court documents reflecting the newly discovered assets." Elena's expression hardened with resolve. "By this time tomorrow, every cent of Martin's hidden fortune will be under scrutiny, if not frozen outright." Morning arrived with a flurry of developments. Elena woke to news alerts reporting that a prominent financial services provider in the Cayman Islands had been raided by authorities. The firm's name, Global Fiduciary Partners, was familiar from her investigation of Martin's offshore structure. The articles mentioned alleged tax evasion and money laundering involving multiple high-net-worth clients from Latin America. Her phone rang as she was processing this information. Agent Ramirez, requesting she come to their offices immediately rather than waiting for their scheduled afternoon meeting. "There's been significant movement in the investigation," he explained, his tone conveying urgency without details. "We need to discuss new developments as soon as possible." Elena arranged for Sophia to be taken directly to school by Lucia, with instructions for the school's administration that her daughter was not to leave with anyone but Elena or Lucia, under any circumstances. Then she headed to the Financial Intelligence Unit's offices, the folder of Singapore documents securely in her bag. The atmosphere at the government building was noticeably different from her previous visit, more personnel moving with purpose, conference rooms filled with intense discussions, an energy that suggested major operational activity. Agent Ramirez ushered her into a private office rather than the conference room they had used before. Inside, she was surprised to find not only Agent Mendoza and Analyst Torres, but also 2 individuals introduced as representatives from the Attorney General's Organized Crime Division. "Thank you for coming so quickly, Ms. Morales," Ramirez began. The investigation has accelerated significantly in the past 24 hours. Based partly on the information you provided, we executed search warrants at global fiduciary partners in the Cayman Islands through our international cooperation channels. I saw the news, Elena acknowledged. What hasn't been made public, Ramirez continued, is that we've uncovered evidence of a much larger operation than initially suspected. Your husband's accounts appear to be part of a sophisticated money laundering network serving multiple high-profile clients, including individuals with connections to organized crime. The organized crime prosecutor, introduced as Fiscal Garcia, leaned forward. Ms. Morales, what we're about to discuss is highly sensitive. Before we continue, I need your assurance that you understand the confidential nature of this briefing. Of course, Elena agreed, professional instincts automatically engaging. I understand and respect the confidentiality requirements. Fiscal Garcia nodded, satisfied. The raid in Cayman has yielded substantial electronic evidence. Your husband, along with several other individuals, has been detained for questioning by Cayman authorities. They're currently reviewing options for formal charges under their jurisdiction. The news that Martin had been detained sent a complex wave of emotions through Elena: vindication, concern, and a strange hollowness that might have been grief for what their life together had become. Additionally, Agent Mendoza added, we've received intelligence that one of your husband's business associates attempted to access the frozen Cayman accounts yesterday using falsified authorization codes, an act that triggered additional security protocols and led to that individual's detention as well. Who? Elena asked, immediately thinking of the important people Martin had referenced. The agents exchanged glances before Ramirez answered. Roberto Vidal. The name struck Elena with unexpected force. Roberto Vidal, one of Mexico City's most prominent real estate developers and a frequent dinner guest in their home. A man who had given Sofia an extravagant quinceañera gift just last year, who had vacationed with them in Tulum, who had been a supposed friend for over a decade. Roberto is involved in this? She asked, her disbelief evident. It appears Mr. Vidal is a key figure in the network, Fiscal Garcia confirmed. Preliminary evidence suggests he used legitimate real estate developments to launder funds for several criminal organizations, with your husband serving as a financial facilitator for these operations. The revelation restructured Elena's understanding of the past 15 years. How many of their social connections, their supposed friendships, had been built around this shadow financial network? How much of Martin's success had been tied to criminal enterprises rather than legitimate business acumen? Ms. Morales, Agent Ramirez said gently, breaking into her thoughts, I understand this must be shocking. But it's important for us to know, did you have any suspicion that your husband's business activities might involve criminal elements? No, Elena answered firmly. I knew he was hiding assets offshore, that's what initiated my investigation, but I had no indication of criminal connections. She paused, remembering something. Although, in retrospect, there were occasional cash transactions in his business that seemed unusual. I assumed they were related to the real estate industry's informal practices, not this. The prosecutor seemed satisfied with her answer, making brief notes before Fiscal Garcia continued. Given these developments, we need to discuss your security situation. Individuals associated with this network may perceive you as a threat, particularly if they become aware of your cooperation with authorities. Martin made veiled threats last night, Elena acknowledged, removing her phone. I recorded the conversation. He mentioned important people being affected by the account freezes and implied there could be consequences for Sofia and me. She played the recording, watching the officials' expressions harden as they listened to Martin's implied threats and her calm counter-response. This is significant evidence, Fiscal Garcia stated when the recording ended. Your husband has essentially confirmed third-party involvement in his financial structures and suggested potential harm to witnesses. We need to discuss protective measures, Agent Ramirez interjected. At minimum, we recommend relocation to a secure residence and security protocols for both you and your daughter. Elena nodded, thinking of Lucia's suggestion about the vacant apartment in her building. I'm already arranging alternative accommodation with enhanced security. But before we discuss that further, there's something else you should know. She withdrew Vanessa's folder from her bag and placed it on the desk. I received information yesterday about additional hidden assets in Singapore, structured through a Liechtenstein trust. Approximately $12 million, completely separate from the Cayman accounts. As she detailed her meeting with Vanessa and the nature of the Singapore holdings, she observed the investigators' growing interest. This consultant, Vanessa Ortiz, she's planning to come forward voluntarily? Agent Mendoza clarified. Yes, she said she had arranged to meet with authorities today, Elena confirmed. She already has, Fiscal Garcia revealed. Ms. Ortiz presented herself at our offices this morning with substantially the same information you're providing now. She's currently giving a formal statement. Elena felt a rush of respect for Vanessa's courage. Following through on her commitment to come forward despite the obvious risks to herself demonstrated integrity Elena hadn't initially given her credit for. This Singapore information opens a new dimension to the investigation, Agent Ramirez explained. If verified, it suggests an even more sophisticated financial structure than we initially believed, possibly involving different criminal networks or higher-value transactions. For the next 2 hours, Elena worked with the investigators, providing additional context for the Singapore documents based on her forensic accounting expertise. She identified transaction patterns, entity relationships, and potential vulnerabilities in the structure that might help authorities freeze those assets as well. As the session concluded, Fiscal Garcia addressed Elena directly. Ms. Morales, your assistance has been invaluable. We'd like to formalize your role as a cooperating witness in this investigation, which would provide certain protections and resources. Including security? Elena asked, thinking of Sophia. Yes, Agent Ramirez confirmed. We can arrange immediate protective surveillance and, if necessary, temporary relocation to a secure facility. Elena considered the offer. While the protection was appealing, she was reluctant to further disrupt Sophia's life by moving to some anonymous safe house. I appreciate the offer, but I'd prefer to maintain as much normalcy as possible for my daughter, she explained. If you could provide security monitoring at our new apartment and during transits to school and work, that would be preferable to complete relocation. After some discussion, they reached a compromise. Elena and Sophia would move into the vacant apartment in Lucia's building, which would be vetted and monitored by security specialists. Additionally, they would have a security detail for transportation and a direct emergency line to the investigative team. As Elena prepared to leave, Agent Ramirez asked one final question. Is there anyone else in your husband's circle that you believe might have information relevant to this investigation? Business associates, friends, other potential witnesses? Elena thought carefully. There's his executive assistant, Carmen Mendez. She's worked with Martin for over 8 years and manages his calendar, correspondence, everything. If anyone knows the details of his operations, it would be her. We'll look into it, Ramirez promised. And Ms. Morales? For your own safety, please limit any discussion of these matters to your attorney and those directly involved in the investigation. The more people who know about your cooperation, the greater the potential security risk. By mid-afternoon, Elena had briefed Claudia on the latest developments and authorized her to file amended court documents reflecting the newly discovered Singapore assets. The divorce proceedings now seemed almost secondary to the expanding criminal investigation, but Elena remained determined to secure her and Sophia's financial future regardless of what happened to Martin. This changes the dynamic considerably, Claudia observed after absorbing the news of Martin's detention and the broader criminal implications. If formal charges are filed, the divorce becomes complicated by potential asset forfeiture in criminal proceedings. Meaning? Elena asked. Meaning the government may claim priority over certain assets if they're deemed proceeds of criminal activity, Claudia explained. However, as an innocent spouse with no knowledge of or participation in the illegal activities, you have legal protections. We'll need to coordinate closely with the prosecutors to ensure your interests and Sophia's are protected. The conversation shifted to more immediate concerns, completing the move to the new apartment, establishing security protocols, and managing Sophia's understanding of the increasingly complex situation. How much should I tell her? Elena asked, the question that had been weighing on her mind. Claudia considered this thoughtfully. Children are remarkably resilient, but they need age-appropriate truth. Sophia already knows about the divorce and her father's infidelity. I think she needs to know that there are now legal issues involving her father's business activities, not the criminal details, but enough that she understands why security measures are necessary. Elena nodded, knowing the difficult conversation couldn't be postponed much longer. She'll have questions I can't answer. Then be honest about that too, Claudia advised. Tell her there are things you don't know yet, or things you can't discuss because of the ongoing legal process. Children respect honesty, even when the answers aren't complete. After leaving Claudia's office, Elena received a text from Lucia confirming that the apartment was available and the property manager had agreed to expedite the rental process given the circumstances. Security personnel from the Financial Intelligence Unit had already done an initial assessment of the building and approved it for their protection plan. Elena headed to Sophia's school, arriving just as classes were ending. She found her daughter waiting in the administration office as arranged, her expression a mixture of annoyance and curiosity. "Mom, what's going on?" Sophia demanded as soon as they were in the car. "The school wouldn't let me leave with Mariana's mom for study group, and there's a weird car that's been following us since we left." Elena glanced in the rearview mirror, noting the discreet but unmistakable security vehicle maintaining a constant distance behind them. "That's part of what we need to talk about. But not here in the car. Let's wait until we get to Aunt Lucia's." Sophia crossed her arms, clearly unsatisfied with this deflection but willing to wait. When they arrived at Lucia's building, Elena noted additional security personnel in the lobby who nodded subtly in recognition as they passed. Upstairs, Lucia had prepared the apartment for their arrival, stocking the refrigerator and making up beds in both bedrooms. After giving them a brief tour and promising to come by later with dinner, she discreetly withdrew to give mother and daughter privacy for their conversation. Elena led Sophia to the living room sofa, taking a deep breath as she prepared to explain their new reality. "Sophia, remember yesterday when I told you about the court hearing and the financial issues with your father?" She began carefully. Sophia nodded, her expression suddenly serious. "You said he took our money." "Yes, well, there's more to the situation than I initially explained." Elena chose her words with care. "Your father's business activities are now being investigated by financial authorities. It's complicated and involves legal issues I don't fully understand myself yet." "Is Dad in trouble with the police?" Sophia asked directly. Elena hesitated, then opted for honest simplicity. "Yes. He's currently being questioned by authorities in the Cayman Islands about his financial activities." Sophia absorbed this information with remarkable composure. "Is that why we're staying here instead of at Aunt Lucia's house? And why there are security people following us?" "You noticed them?" Elena observed, not entirely surprised by her daughter's perceptiveness. "Mom, I'm 14, not 4, Sophia replied with teenage exasperation. "There's a guy in the lobby who definitely isn't just a doorman, and the car that followed us from school was super obvious." Despite the seriousness of the situation, Elena couldn't suppress a small smile at her daughter's astuteness. "Yes, that's part of it. Because I've provided information to the investigators, we need some extra security for a while. It's mostly precautionary." Sophia's eyes widened. "Are we in danger? Like, actual danger?" "No, sweetheart," Elena assured her quickly, though not entirely truthfully. "It's standard procedure in financial investigations like this. The security is just to be extra safe while everything gets sorted out." Sophia fell silent, processing this information. Then she asked the question Elena had been dreading, "Is Dad going to go to jail?" The directness of the question demanded an equally direct answer. "I don't know," Elena admitted. "That depends on what the investigation finds and what laws might have been broken. But Sophia, no matter what happens with your father legally, it doesn't change the fact that he loves you, and it doesn't change who you are." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes, the first real emotional breakdown Elena had seen since the crisis began. "Everyone at school will find out. They'll talk about us." Elena moved closer, wrapping an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "Maybe. But true friends stand by you during difficult times. And we'll get through this together, no matter what people say. Sophia leaned into her mother's embrace, allowing herself a moment of vulnerability before straightening up, wiping her eyes with determined dignity. How long will we have to stay here? And what about all our stuff at home? We'll be here for a while, Elena explained. I'm signing a lease tomorrow. As for our things, we can go back to the house with security personnel to collect whatever else we need. We'll make this place comfortable, I promise. They spent the next hour discussing practical matters, how Sophia would get to school, when they might retrieve more of their belongings, how long the security measures might last. The conversation had just shifted to decorating their new temporary home when Elena's phone rang with Claudia's number. Excuse me, sweetie. I need to take this, Elena said, stepping into the kitchen for privacy. Claudia, what's happening? The Singapore accounts have been frozen, Claudia reported without preamble. The financial intelligence team worked with Singaporean authorities to secure an emergency order based on the documentation you provided. $12 million, exactly as Vanessa indicated. Elena leaned against the counter, absorbing the news. That was fast. Faster than normal, Claudia agreed. Apparently, there's significant international pressure involved in this investigation. But there's more. Martin's attorney has contacted me requesting an urgent meeting. About the divorce? Elena asked, surprised. No, Claudia corrected. He wants to discuss a potential cooperation agreement with prosecutors. Apparently, Martin is willing to provide information about the broader network in exchange for certain considerations. He's turning on his associates, Elena realized, thinking of Roberto Vidal and whoever else might be involved. The important people. It appears so, Claudia confirmed, and his attorney indicated that Martin specifically wants to communicate with you as part of this process. He claims to have information relevant to your safety that he'll only share directly. Elena's instinctive response was refusal. After Martin's veiled threats against Sophia, the last thing she wanted was direct communication with him. And yet, if he genuinely had information that could affect their security. What do the prosecutors say? She asked. They're interested in any cooperation Martin might offer, but they've left the decision about personal communication entirely to you. They can arrange a monitored call or video conference if you agree. Elena considered her options carefully. Tell them I'll agree to a video conference, but only with investigators present and recording. And I want you there as well. I'll arrange it, Claudia promised. Likely tomorrow, given the time differences with Cayman. After ending the call, Elena returned to the living room to find Sophia scrolling through her phone, her expression suddenly troubled. Mom? She said, her voice small. There's something on the news about Dad. Elena sat beside her daughter, looking at the phone screen displaying a breaking news alert. Prominent Mexico City businessman Martin Acosta detained in Cayman Islands financial crimes investigation. Sources report possible connections to organized crime money laundering operation. The story had broken. There would be no containing it now. Sophia looked up, her eyes searching her mother's face. Is this true? Is Dad connected to organized crime? Elena took the phone gently, setting it aside. The investigation is ongoing, Sophia. The news often runs ahead of the facts. What I know is that your father's financial activities are being scrutinized, and yes, there are questions about who he might have been doing business with. But you knew, Sophia pressed. You knew before this, didn't you? That's why we have security. I knew there were serious concerns, Elena acknowledged. But I don't have all the answers. No one does yet. Sophia pulled away slightly, her expression hardening in a way that reminded Elena painfully of Martin. You should have told me everything. I'm not a baby. You're right, Elena conceded. I've been trying to protect you, but you deserve to know what's happening, even when it's difficult. From now on, I'll be more forthcoming, though there may still be things I can't discuss because of the investigation. Sophia seemed placated by this promise, though a new weariness remained in her eyes, the look of a child forced to confront adult complexities before their time. Can I call Dad? She asked suddenly. The question caught Elena off guard. Her instinct was to refuse, to shield Sophia from whatever manipulation Martin might attempt, but denying her daughter contact with her father would only reinforce the growing division between them. "I'll need to check with the investigators," Elena replied honestly. "Your father is currently in custody, so any communication would need to be arranged through official channels. But if it's possible, yes, you can speak with him." Sophia nodded, seemingly satisfied with this compromise. "I don't even know what I'd say to him," she admitted quietly. "I'm so angry, but he's still my dad." Elena pulled her daughter close. "You don't have to figure that out right now. It's okay to have complicated feelings. It's okay to love someone and be angry with them at the same time." As they sat together in the gathering dusk of their new temporary home, Elena reflected on how thoroughly their lives had transformed in just a few days. From the moment she had discovered those first financial discrepancies to now, with Martin detained thousands of miles away, their assets frozen across multiple countries, and their family permanently altered, the trajectory had been both devastatingly swift and somehow inevitable. Martin had emptied their accounts for what she had believed was his mistress but now understood was a desperate attempt to salvage his crumbling financial schemes. In response, she had frozen not just his secret fortune but apparently helped unravel an entire criminal network. The consequences were still unfolding, rippling outward to affect people she had never met, systems she had never intended to challenge. Tomorrow would bring a confrontation with Martin via video conference, likely more revelations about the extent of his activities, and continuing adjustments to their new protected status. But for tonight, holding her daughter close in this unfamiliar apartment, Elena focused on the one certainty amid all the chaos: whatever came next, she would face it with the same methodical determination that had brought her this far. The notification sound on her phone interrupted these reflections, a message from Agent Ramirez: additional security measures in place. All known accounts successfully frozen. Singapore authorities cooperating fully. Meeting scheduled for 10 a.m. tomorrow to prepare for video conference with Emma Costa. Elena read the message twice, then set the phone aside. Whatever Martin wanted to communicate tomorrow, whether genuine security concerns or manipulative tactics, she would be prepared. The financial and legal structures he had built over years of deception were crumbling around him. His secret fortune was beyond his reach. His criminal associates were being exposed, and Elena, the wife he had underestimated and betrayed, was helping dismantle it all, piece by methodical piece. The Financial Intelligence Unit's secure conference room had been prepared for the video call with Martin. A large screen dominated one wall, cameras positioned to capture the room's occupants while maintaining a professional distance. Elena sat between Claudia and Agent Ramirez, with Fiscal Garcia and Agent Mendoza completing the semicircle facing the screen. "Remember," Claudia murmured as they waited for the connection, "you're not obligated to respond to anything personal or provocative. This is specifically about security information he claims to have. If he veers into other territory, I'll intervene." Elena nodded, grateful for her attorney's protective instincts but confident in her own ability to maintain boundaries with Martin. The past days had crystallized something within her, a clarity of purpose and self-possession that made her former husband's manipulations seem transparent and ineffective. The screen flickered to life, revealing Martin seated in what appeared to be an interview room. Elena barely recognized him. Just days ago, he had been the picture of successful confidence, immaculately dressed, perfectly groomed, radiating the charismatic authority that had characterized their marriage. The man on the screen was disheveled, unshaven, with dark circles under his eyes suggesting sleepless nights. Beside him sat a distinguished older man Elena recognized as Javier Robles, his attorney. On the Cayman Islands side, a local prosecutor and investigator completed the arrangement. For a moment, no one spoke as Martin stared at the screen, his eyes finding Elena with an intensity that once might have unsettled her. Now, she met his gaze with composed neutrality. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting, Ms. Morales," the Cayman prosecutor began formally. "Mr. Acosta has indicated he has security information relevant to you and your daughter that he wishes to communicate directly. We've agreed to facilitate this exchange as part of ongoing discussions regarding potential cooperation." Elena nodded acknowledgement but remained silent, waiting. Martin leaned forward, his voice hoarse when he finally spoke. Elena. You look well. Mr. Acosta, Fiscal Garcia intervened smoothly. Please confine your comments to the security information you claim to possess. This is not a personal conversation. Martin's jaw tightened momentarily before he composed himself. Very well. Elena, what you've stumbled into is significantly more dangerous than you realize. Roberto Vidal isn't just a business associate, he's a financial manager for the Zarate cartel's real estate investments. When you froze those accounts, you didn't just affect me. You froze nearly $50 million of their money. The revelation sent a ripple of tension through the room. The Zarate cartel was one of Mexico's most notorious criminal organizations, known for brutal enforcement of their interests. The Zarates don't know yet that it was you who triggered the investigation, Martin continued. They believe it was a routine regulatory action that I failed to prevent, but that protection won't last. Once they realize your role. He left the implication hanging in the air, his expression grim. Are you threatening my client, Mr. Acosta? Claudia asked sharply. I'm trying to protect her, Martin countered. And Sophia. Whatever you think of me, Elena, you know I would never want harm to come to our daughter. Elena studied her husband's face, searching for the manipulation beneath the apparent concern. What specifically are you suggesting is the threat, and from whom? Miguel Zarate, the cartel's financial lieutenant, has already reached out through intermediaries asking what happened to their investments, Martin explained. When Roberto was detained trying to access the accounts, the Zarates became suspicious. They've begun investigating everyone connected to the frozen assets, including the registered owners of the shell companies. Which include me as your spouse, Elena concluded. Yes, Martin confirmed. Your name appears on subsidiary documentation for several entities, though you weren't aware of it. I used your signature from other documents. The admission of forgery barely registered against the larger implications. Elena had been unknowingly associated with cartel financial structures, a realization that explained the extensive security measures the authorities had implemented so quickly. What's your proposed solution, Mr. Acosta? Fiscal Garcia asked, bringing the conversation back to its purpose. Martin glanced at his attorney, who nodded slightly before he continued. I have detailed information about the entire Zarate financial network, not just the portions frozen in Cayman and Singapore, but their complete global structure. Names, accounts, properties, business fronts. I'm prepared to provide all of it to authorities in exchange for two guarantees, full protection for Elena and Sophia, and consideration in my own case. You want a deal, Agent Ramirez stated flatly. I want my family safe, Martin insisted. Whatever you think of me, that's the truth. The information I have could dismantle the Zarate's entire financial operation. That's worth something. The officials exchanged glances, clearly evaluating the potential value of Martin's offer against the standard reluctance to negotiate with alleged criminals. There's more, Martin added when no one immediately responded. The Singapore accounts, the ones Vanessa told you about. They're not just mine. They're the central clearinghouse for the entire Zarate international operation. That's why they're structured through Liechtenstein, to create additional distance and deniability. Elena couldn't contain her shock. You made me an unwitting party to cartel money laundering? For the first time, Martin had the grace to look genuinely ashamed. It didn't start that way. When we met, my real estate business was legitimate. The Zarate connection came later, through Roberto. By then, I was already overleveraged on several developments. They offered financing when banks wouldn't. One transaction led to another, and eventually, you became their financial manager, Elena finished, disgust evident in her voice. Their facilitator, Martin corrected, as if the distinction mattered. I created the structures, managed the transactions. I never handled physical cash or drugs. I told myself it was just money moving through the system, that I wasn't really part of their operation. The self-justification was so transparent, so pathetically inadequate that Elena almost pitied him. Almost. Mr. Acosta, Fiscal Garcia interjected, we'll need to evaluate the information you're offering before discussing any potential arrangements. If you have specific, actionable intelligence regarding threats to Ms. Morales and your daughter, we need that immediately, regardless of any broader agreement. Martin nodded, then looked directly at Elena. Miguel Zarate has people watching our house, your house now. They've been there since yesterday. They don't know you've relocated, but they will figure it out eventually. They have contacts throughout the city, including within law enforcement. He paused, visibly struggling with his next words. Elena, these people. They don't recognize boundaries. If they determine you're responsible for their financial losses, they won't care that you're a mother, that you were ignorant of the connections. They'll only care about making an example. The clinical detachment Elena had maintained throughout the meeting wavered momentarily as the full implications of Martin's words registered. This wasn't just about frozen accounts and divorce proceedings anymore. It wasn't even about Martin's betrayal or hidden assets. It was about Sophia's safety, and her own, against threats she had never anticipated when she began investigating her husband's financial deceptions. We need names, Agent Ramirez demanded. Specific individuals, operational details. Not promises of future cooperation, actual, verifiable intelligence we can act on immediately. Martin looked to his attorney again, who spoke for the first time. My client is prepared to provide preliminary intelligence immediately, with the understanding that good faith efforts will be made toward a formal cooperation agreement. We recognize the time-sensitive nature of the security concerns. What followed was a detailed exchange of information, Martin identifying specific Zarate operatives believed to be conducting surveillance, their methods, contact protocols, and chain of command. The investigators took comprehensive notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions or pressing for additional details. Elena listened with growing horror as the extent of her husband's entanglement with organized crime became clear. This wasn't merely tax evasion or financial misconduct. Martin had been an integral part of a sophisticated money laundering operation serving one of Mexico's most violent criminal organizations. When the operational briefing concluded, Martin asked for a moment to speak directly to Elena. After a brief consultation, the officials reluctantly agreed, though they remained present and recording. Elena, Martin began, his voice softer than before, I know you have every reason to hate me. What I've done, to our marriage, to our family, to you personally, is unforgivable. But please believe me when I say I never intended to put you or Sophia at risk. Elena regarded him steadily, searching for the manipulative charm that had characterized so many of his apologies throughout their marriage. Instead, she found only exhaustion and what appeared to be genuine remorse. Risk isn't about intention, Martin, she replied evenly. It's about choices and consequences. You chose this path, one decision at a time, over years. The consequences now affect all of us, including Sophia. Martin winced at the mention of their daughter. How was she? Confused, angry. Trying to understand how her father could be the person in the news stories. Elena paused, then added, she asked to speak with you. Hope flickered across Martin's face. I'd like that. If it's permitted. That's not my decision, Elena clarified. It will depend on the authorities and what's deemed appropriate under the circumstances. A heavy silence fell between them, 15 years of shared history now irreparably altered by the revelations of the past days.